What's up, guys? I just spent hours digging through Reddit and found the ultimate collection of relationship stories for you. Expect absurd drama, petty fights, and pure chaos. Exactly what we love around here. So kick back, relax, close your eyes, and let's vibe together in Minecraft while we dive into these wild stories. Let's go! My girlfriend and I have been together for just under a year. We don't live together, and both work full time, and we are exclusive as far as I'm aware. Things were going pretty great between us until recently. We have our issues like any other couple, but nothing major that would cause either of us to do something drastic. She's always been pretty affectionate and seemed really into me. We'd text throughout the day and see each other a few times a week, usually spending at least one weekend day together. About 3 months ago, I started noticing my girlfriend spending a lot of time on the phone with her friend Jessie. She always says that Jessie is just a good friend, and that's it. However, she often spends any time she can on the phone with him, even when her and I are out together. Like we'll be at dinner and she'll excuse herself to take his call, or sometimes she'll be texting him while we're watching a movie. I've tried to not think too much about it because I don't want to be that controlling boyfriend who dictates who she can talk to. One time we were at this Italian place I'd been wanting to try for months. I finally got reservations, and halfway through our appetizers, her phone rings, and she immediately gets up to take the call. She was gone for like 15 minutes, and our entrees came while she was still outside talking to this guy. When she finally came back, she acted like it was totally normal to abandon me at dinner to talk to another dude. She said it was important, but wouldn't say what it was about. Their conversations don't really lead me to believe anything suspicious is going on from what I can hear. It's usually just typical friend stuff, talking about their days, some inside jokes I don't get, and sometimes about his kids. Oh yeah, Jesse has 2 young boys he's raising by himself, after his ex left or something. I never heard the entire story. My girlfriend would occasionally mention how hard it must be for him to raise 2 kids alone, and how she admired him for own after his ex left or something. I never heard the entire story. My girlfriend would occasionally mention how challenging it must be for him to raise 2 kids alone, and how she admired him for stepping up. She'd get this strange look in her eyes when she talked about him, but I tried not to read into it too much. She told me they met through some shared friends a few years ago and kept in touch online. In her words, they'd never been anything more than friends. I asked on one occasion if they had ever hooked up, and she became quite defensive, saying not everyone wants to sleep with their friends, and making me feel like I was being ridiculous for even asking. However, then about a month and a half ago, my girlfriend informs me she's going to visit Jesse, who lives 2 states over. Just drops it on me like it's nothing. She states they've been friends for years and she wants to see him and meet his kids in person. I couldn't go since I had to work that week, and frankly, I wasn't even asked. She simply stated, "I'm going to visit Jesse next month," and when I inquired if I could join, she claimed it wasn't a good time due to my work schedule. Naturally, I informed her that I wasn't comfortable with her visiting a male friend out of state on her own. I mean, wouldn't any sensible person feel the same, right? Yet she kept insisting that Jesse was just a friend, and I had nothing to fret over. She mentioned she'd be staying at his place, but since Jesse is a single father of 2 young boys, my girlfriend guaranteed me nothing would occur. She even made a remark like, "What do you imagine will happen with 2 small kids running around?" We actually had quite a significant argument about it. I explained how it appeared from my viewpoint. My girlfriend suddenly wanting to stay with some single guy I'd never met, who resides in another state. She accused me of not trusting her, and stated that if I were going to be this insecure, perhaps we should reconsider our relationship. That silenced me rather quickly because, despite everything, I truly do care for her and don't wish to lose her. Even though I voiced my opinion and concerns repeatedly, my GF took the trip regardless. She did consent to sharing her location with me to ease my mind, which I valued but still felt strange about the entire situation. The entire week she was away, I was anxious. She'd text me from time to time with updates or photos of them at the park or zoo with his children, but the messages felt, I don't know, strained, as if she was trying too hard to demonstrate to me that everything was innocent. I checked her location several times. All right, maybe more than several. And she was consistently at what I presumed was his residence, or at some family-friendly spot nearby. Thus I had no genuine reason to suspect anything, but I still had this persistent feeling in my gut. She was away for approximately a week and then returned, as if nothing had occurred. She showed me some photos of her and Jesse and his children at a certain park and spoke about how adorable his children were and such. Then we just sort of continued with life. I tried to dismiss it from my mind because I didn't want to be that person who can't trust his girlfriend. One thing that bothered me, however, when I requested to see a photo of Jesse alone, I was curious what this man looked like. She scrolled through her photos for a minute and then stated she didn't have any good ones of just him. All the photos conveniently included the children as well. I found that odd, but didn't press it. But then something occurred that sent me spiraling. Approximately 2 weeks ago, my girlfriend requested me to go to our local Target to collect an online order she had placed. She informed me she had ordered shampoo and a few hygiene products, deodorant, lotion, etc., as she was running low. I was already going to be near that Target for a haircut anyway, so I agreed and mentioned I'd collect it on my way home. Upon reaching the customer service counter and providing her name, they produced a bag containing a pregnancy test. I stood there utterly stunned and bewildered. I informed them that this wasn't what she said she had ordered. I checked the name and phone number attached to the bag and found it matched my girlfriend's number, so it couldn't possibly have been another girl with the same name. The guy at the counter rechecked the system and produced a second bag with the shampoo and other items she had actually mentioned. To clarify this crucial detail, there existed 2 separate orders under her name. One contained the shampoo and hygiene products she'd informed me about, and the other solely a pregnancy test that she never brought up. The orders had been placed approximately 12 hours apart, based on the receipts. I took both bags and departed without posing further questions to the Target employee, because I was too flustered and didn't wish to create a scene. I sat in my car for around 10 minutes, simply gazing at this pregnancy test, attempting to comprehend it all. Why would she hide this from me? Why send me to pick up her order, knowing there was another order waiting there? Did she forget? Was she hoping to pick it up herself later? Here's what truly worried me. There was virtually no chance that I could have possibly impregnated her. We always use protection. Always. I'm extremely cautious about that kind of thing because neither of us is in a position to have children right now. We've discussed having a family someday, but certainly not anytime soon, and we both agreed early on that an accidental pregnancy would be a catastrophe for both our careers. When I arrived home, I handed her the bag with the shampoo and other items, and initially didn't mention the pregnancy test. I wanted to see if she would bring it up. She didn't. We just spent a few hours together normally, watched some TV, and then later that night, I finally asked her why there was a pregnancy test at Target under her name. She appeared completely surprised. At first, she said she had no idea and that she did not order a pregnancy test. I asked her to show me her Target app to prove it, and she became a bit defensive, claiming that it was probably her sister, since her sister sometimes uses her Target account to order things. She asserted that women sometimes use pregnancy tests to regulate their PMS or for other purposes besides determining if they're pregnant. I know nothing about how pregnancy tests function, but this sounded like nonsense to me. Why would her sister order a pregnancy test to my girlfriend's local Target instead of the one near her own house? Her sister lives about 20 minutes away and has her own Target much closer to her. And why wouldn't her sister just go buy one in person instead of ordering it online for pickup? Also, her sister is married with a 3-year-old and has told us repeatedly they're finished having children. It simply didn't make sense. When I pressed her about it, she became annoyed and said I was being paranoid and accusatory. She suggested perhaps it was a mistake, or that Target had mixed up the orders. But I saw both receipts with her name and number on them, so that didn't make sense either. However, I didn't have any concrete proof that she was lying, so I just dropped it for the time being. She assured me that she's not pregnant, and that the test wasn't an indication of her cheating when she was on her trip to see Jessie. For a few days after that, things were strained between us. She seemed distant and was on her phone even more, Jessie. For a few days after that, things were strained between us. She seemed distant and was on her phone even more than usual. I observed she started bringing her phone with her to the bathroom, which she never used to do. And when I'd enter the room, she'd quickly switch applications, or put her phone away. Classic suspicious behavior, right? The other evening we went out for dinner, and she made a point of proving she isn't pregnant by ordering a few cocktails, like she specifically mentioned. See, I wouldn't be drinking alcohol if I was pregnant, and then went on to order multiple drinks. It seemed forced, like she was performing for me rather than just enjoying our evening out. I never knew what happened to the pregnancy test after that day. I'm unsure if she took it, or threw it away, or what. It just vanished. I looked for it in her bathroom trash, but didn't find anything. Maybe she disposed of it somewhere else, or maybe she never took it at all. I can't stop dwelling on this. The timing is just too suspicious. She visits this guy, Jesse, who she talks to constantly. Then 2 weeks later, there's a pregnancy test she tried to hide from me. And now that I think about it, she's been acting a bit different since she got back from her trip. She's not as affectionate as she used to be. We used to have sex pretty regularly, like 2-3 times a week. But since she got back from her trip, it's been maybe once a week, and it feels like she's just going through the motions. She spends more time on her phone, and she's been going out with her girlfriends more often lately, though I have no way to verify if she's actually meeting her friends or not. One night, she said she was going out with her friend Ashley for drinks. I was bored and decided to drive by the bar they usually go to. I know, kinda stalkerish. But I was feeling really insecure. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. When she got home later and I casually asked how Ashley was doing, she started this whole story about how Ashley was having issues with her boyfriend. Excessive detail, you know? Like she was trying to persuade me they had really been together. After that, nothing much happened for a few days. We just continued our usual routines, but a tension lingered between us. She'd get irritated by small things I did that never bothered her previously. I'd find her staring blankly with a troubled expression. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd simply say nothing, or I'm just tired. I considered just asking her directly if something happened with Jessie, but I was afraid of the answer. Am I wrong for accusing my girlfriend of infidelity while she was away? Update 1. So I recognize that although my GF and I have protected sex, the possibility of me getting her pregnant is technically there. However, I firmly believe that despite our intimacy, I couldn't have possibly impregnated my GF. Not to be vulgar and personal, but I never finish inside of her because I want to lessen our chances of having children until we're both prepared. That's why when I saw the pregnancy test, I instantly believed she cheated on me. Some of you suggested that I should just speak to her about it again, but many more advised I should just check her phone or something to see if there's any proof. I hesitated to do that because it seemed wrong to breach her privacy, but I was going mad dwelling on this whole situation to the one who suggested I should just trust her and not make assumptions. I tried that for weeks, and it led nowhere. And to those suggesting I should have confronted Jesse directly, I don't even have his contact information, and I'm not sure that would have achieved anything except perhaps getting him to align their accounts with my GF. So last night, after reading all your comments, I fell into a panic and became distressed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just kept pondering everything again and again. I feel like I'm losing my sanity. I drove to her apartment while she was at work. She had given me a key a few months ago when I was taking care of her cat while she was on a business trip, and I found her iPad resting on the coffee table. I know many of you will judge me for this, but I was desperate. I tried using her birthday as the password, and to my astonishment, it worked. She's always been somewhat careless with her passwords, employing the same one for everything. I know what I did was wrong, but I needed to know if she was being unfaithful to me. I instantly went through her messages and found an entire message thread with Jesse that she never mentioned to me. There were messages that made it abundantly clear they had sex on multiple occasions while she was visiting him. Some of the messages were highly explicit, and I won't repeat them here, but believe me, there was no doubt about what had occurred between them. He sent messages like, "I can't stop thinking about that night, and the kids are asleep. Wish you were here in bed with me right now." She sent replies that made me feel physically sick to read. It was clear this wasn't the first time they'd been intimate either. There were references to them getting together years ago before she met me. There were also messages about the pregnancy scare. She texted him a few days after getting back from her trip, saying she was late and panicking. He told her to take a test and let him know. Then a few days later, she sent a message saying, "False alarm, not pregnant, just stress." He responded with a relieved emoji and said, "Thank God, not ready for kid number 3 yet, LOL. I'm honestly so devastated by this, and I've been such a bundle of nerves since last night. I haven't eaten and I've barely slept." The worst part is seeing all these messages where they were making fun of me. She told him I was suspicious but too trusting to discover anything. They actually joked about how I believed her story about nothing happening with his kids around. Apparently the kids were at their grandparents' house for 2 of the nights she was there. I feel like such an idiot. All those times she was on the phone with him and I was in the same room, totally unaware. Now I'm waiting to confront her, but I truly don't know how. I'm afraid she'll just turn it around on me and make me the bad guy for breaching her privacy. Honestly, at this stage, I don't even care. I just want to get this over with and move on with my life. Some of you said I should collect more evidence before confronting her, but I think what I saw is more than enough. Others suggested I should just ghost her completely, but that feels too childish for a relationship that's gone on for nearly a year. I want to at least look her in the eye when I end things. She was my first serious girlfriend in a long time, and now I feel like an afterthought. I invested so much in this relationship. I adjusted my life to make time for her. I introduced her to my family. I was even considering asking her to move in together when our leases expired in a few months. And all along she was cheating on me with this guy. Edit, for those asking if she explicitly stated using protection with Jesse. From what I gathered from their messages, they didn't. There was some joke from him about pulling out Game Strong, which made me want to vomit. So yes, they were being utterly reckless too, which just adds another layer to this entire mess. Update 2. So last night, I finally mustered the courage to tell my GF that I needed to talk to her. At first, she kept saying she was busy and tried to reschedule for the weekend, but I insisted on seeing her in person, so she eventually told me to come to her place around 8 p.m. I wanted to remain calm and composed, not letting my emotions overwhelm me. I even jotted down some key points I wanted to make so I wouldn't get diverted if she tried to change the subject or turn things around on me. I went over to her place and she was acting completely normal, as if nothing was wrong. She offered me a drink, asked about my day, the usual things. I refused the drink because I wanted to keep a clear head. I sat down on her couch and she tried to cuddle up next to me like everything was fine. I moved away slightly and told her we needed to discuss something serious. I stressed that ever since she got back from her trip, things had felt strange between us. She asserted I was the one who was making things strange by believing that she had cheated on me. She persisted in claiming that the pregnancy test wasn't hers, and that her friend Jesse was merely a friend, and they simply spent time together, watched movies with his kids, and went to some local attractions. She began getting all defensive again, stating I was being insecure and that if I couldn't trust her, then perhaps we had bigger problems. She even had the nerve to say that my continual accusations were pushing her away and making her reconsider our relationship. I let her go on for a bit, denying everything, and then I finally said, "I know you cheated because I saw the messages between you and Jesse." Her face just fell. For a brief moment, There was this look of pure panic in her eyes. Then she became angry. "You came here without my knowledge and went through my personal messages. That's so messed up and creepy, to be honest," she said. We got into a slight argument as I told her that my suspicions were correct and she was trying to divert the conversation. I asked her to give me her phone and I'll show her all the messages I saw, which were very clear and explicit. I know I could have just shown her screenshots I took of the iPad, but honestly I wanted to see if she'd deleted them or how she'd react. Of course she refused and said we are not married. We don't live together. You don't own or control me. When I tried to get her to address the actual issue, that she cheated on me, she just kept focusing on how I violated her privacy. She refused to admit anything, even when I mentioned specific messages I had read. At one point, she even tried to claim that I must have misunderstood the messages or taken them out of context. She said Jesse is just someone she's very comfortable with, and they have an open communication style that might seem inappropriate to outsiders. Can you believe that? She truly thought I'd accept that explanation after seeing messages clearly describing them having sex. While I agreed with her that going through her iPad was wrong, I decided to end things quickly and simply place her spare set of keys on her coffee table and tell her you cheated, plain and simple. Goodbye and good luck. I walk out and she makes no move to stop me. Later that night, she tries to text me and says she's sorry for what she did. At first, she claimed Jesse was an old boyfriend she'd never told me about, and that they dated years ago before she met me, and that he moved away several years ago. She claims the messages I saw were old conversations they had, but I quickly told her that was clearly not true. I could see the dates on the messages. Then she switched tactics and swears she didn't mean to cheat, and that Jesse must have gotten her drunk and it led to sex. She assures me she is not pregnant with anyone's baby. I don't even know what to believe anymore. I told her that's good because I don't want anything else tying me to you. I wished her good luck again, and I haven't heard from her since. She tried calling me a few times this morning, but I ignored her calls. She also sent a lengthy text about how sorry she is and how it was a mistake, and she wishes she could take it back. Classic stuff you say when you're only sorry you got caught. Personally, I'm relieved, but I'm so upset and devastated by all this. I spoke with my friend Eric, who mentioned he had an ex who cheated on him as well, but she later tried to contact him years later when the guy she cheated on him with turned out to be a bum. He warned me that she might attempt to return once she realizes what she's lost. I told him I'd never take her back, not after this. But he said people do foolish things when they're lonely or their ego is bruised. Thank you all for your input and support. It truly means a lot to have people to talk to about this who understand what I'm experiencing. But that's nothing compared to the next story. I've changed all the names since I don't want my relatives to find out my story. I, a 25-year-old female, have been with Jack for several years. Since the very beginning, I've noticed that while his family has warmed up to me, his sister is always a pain in my ass. For context, Jack is the eldest in his family. His parents are immigrant Asians. His sister Kylie was born 3 years after him. Jack has told me how his parents have always valued high academic scores and pushed both him and his sister to achieve top marks in school. Now, Jack was more into sports than studies, and he was bloody good at it. He loved playing chess and would even stay back after school, as he was part of his school's chess club. His parents did not like this. They would tell him how playing chess was just a waste of time and that anyone could do it, so he should focus more on work. He was typically good at studies, but not as good as his parents wanted. His sister Kylie, on the other hand, was more academically inclined. She would score the highest and would spend all her evenings working on her homework. As you can guess, she was favored more by their parents. Jack has told me how his parents would always compare both their grades and reward Kylie for being better. For instance, they would allow her to have a large birthday party, have sleepovers with her friends, and buy her bigger presents to show their affection. However, when it came to Jack, they would tell him regularly that they were ashamed about his marks. For his birthdays, they would refuse to spend any money, and tell him how he needed to work harder if he wanted to earn a birthday party and gifts. Even writing about this makes me so sad because I have watched Jack break down in front of me while he told me stories from his childhood and how his parents always treated Kylie better. She was the golden child in the family, and she clearly enjoyed it. She would put him down at every chance she got and make fun of his marks. She never had any respect for him as an older sibling, and I think this disrespect still continues today. When it was time for Jack to go to college, his parents made it clear that they could not afford to pay for both of their college tuitions, so they could only pay for his sister's tuition fees, and he needed to apply for scholarships or take a student loan. This completely shocked Jack, and they had a huge fight. He went off on his parents about how they always treated him, and why they even had him if they didn't like him. His parents told him how they had made so many sacrifices over the years for their children, so now it was time for Jack to grow up. Kylie agreed with her parents and told Jack that he was clearly not the intelligent one in the family, so he needed to just suck it up and sacrifice for her sake. She also called him various other names, like loser. Following this argument, Jack realized that his parents would always prefer her over him. When he was admitted to college to study computer science with scholarships, he decided to move out and have limited contact with his family. His parents never came to see him off or assist him in moving into his dorm, which is truly heartbreaking to even consider. Over the years, they would occasionally speak, but Jack would generally keep conversations brief. When he was graduating cum laude, his parents wanted to come and celebrate with him, but Jack prohibited them from attending. They began to weep, saying how he was their son, and they wanted to be there for his significant milestone. Jack reminded them that they had not even bothered to pay for his college tuition, while they paid for Kylie's tuition, so they were no longer permitted to share in his achievements. They argued for a while, but in the end, his parents consented to stay away. This is how their relationship had been for quite some time. I'm an architect, and I hold a master's degree in urban planning from a leading university in our country. Unlike Jack's parents, my parents were comparatively lenient with me. I'm an only child, so I received nearly all the attention. My parents are professors, so my whole life I was encouraged to study what I liked and have other hobbies as well. I must admit that I was lucky to never face any comparison, and my parents have always supported me. When I met Jack, he and I were working from the same office complex but on different floors, as his company was on the second floor and mine was on the seventh. We would usually meet in the elevators and had mutual friends who would hang out as a group, and that's how I met him during a party, and we hit it off. Jack was charming, sweet, genuinely kind. He is the kind of boyfriend who brings me flowers every month, brings me my favorite cheesecake when I have period cramps without even asking, cooks for me, and is open about telling me how much he loves me. Now, I'm a sucker when it comes to romance, so it wasn't long before I moved in with him, as it made more sense given we spent a lot of time together at each other's place. I've heard horror stories from my girlfriends about how some of their boyfriends don't help out around the house, but Jack is the total opposite. He is more of an OCD than me and thoroughly cleans our home every weekend. We share and divide tasks. For instance, if he cooks, I clean up, or if he does the laundry, I fold it. This is how it has always been between us. When it was time to meet each other's parents, he informed me that he had maintained quite limited contact with his parents for a long time, only speaking to them when essential because they had never treated him well, and he recounted all his childhood stories to me. However, when he chose to contact his parents about me, they were thrilled to speak with him and promptly set up a lunch meeting with us for the weekend. I was somewhat anxious about meeting his parents, but this was a significant step for us, so I aimed to give my absolute best. His parents were surprisingly welcoming towards me, and after they learned about my academic background, they became even more courteous. Reflecting now, yes, it's true that they began to favor me due to my academic bent, But I didn't object, since I wished to impress them. His parents spoke to me quite candidly and explained how, after Jack had maintained limited contact with them for years following college, they had been contemplating and realizing they needed to treat him better. They expressed how thankful they were that I entered his life. Otherwise, he might never have contacted them. They even clumsily apologized to him, which utterly astonished Jack. It was pleasant to observe that his parents were at last making an effort in the correct direction. Nonetheless, when Kylie arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Jack had not been told she would even be attending, so he was slightly annoyed. His parents started to justify, explaining that they had decided to invite her, since they felt this would be the perfect time to put the past behind them, so their family could move forward. His mother continued to tell him how his sister was here, only because she was happy for him. Kylie politely gave me a hug, and she just seemed extremely timid at first glance. She completely disregarded Jack as if he didn't even exist and didn't say a single thing to him. When his parents started to boast to her about my academic background, her behavior changed. She started to question me about my work and the university I went to, and would then discreetly mock how urban planners impact the environment. She even asked me at one point how I felt about murdering trees, which shocked me. It was like she wanted to put me down in front of her parents because she just could not cope with the fact that they approved of me. Throughout our meal, she was passive-aggressive. She disputed or corrected everything I said, no matter how trivial. When we were finished with lunch, my father-in-law wanted to pay, but Jack was insisting that he wanted to cover the expenses. Suddenly, Kylie interjected, stating I should be the one to pay for it, since they were all here because of me. She subtly taunted that since I was earning so much, I could at least put my money to good use. This truly offended me, as I did earn quite well, but she had no right to speak to me that way. And I did earn quite well, but she had no right to speak to me that way, and I believe her parents also noticed my facial expressions. They promptly rebuked her, and father-in-law informed her she was being exceptionally rude to me as I was merely a guest. Mother-in-law concurred and told Kylie to be quiet. She evidently disliked that and rose from her seat, pissed, then walked out of the restaurant. Jack's parents apologized repeatedly to me for her behavior and explained how she needs some time to warm up to strangers. I chose to overlook it, believing I would never have to interact with her anyway, and for Jack's sake, I should maintain composure. This should have been my first red flag about her. Unlike Jack's family, my family truly adored Jack and enjoyed getting to know him. My parents were pleased that we were cohabiting and would check in on me regularly. Throughout our years of dating, I have noticed that Kylie is consistently the first to view my stories on social media. Now, I do have a public account where I share my designs and professional achievements. I only have 1,000 followers, so I easily notice when she views my stories daily, yet doesn't interact or follow me. As Jack's parents began meeting with me and Jack more frequently, Kylie's obsession with me only grew stronger. We had a family message group with me, Jack, his parents, and Kylie. It was largely inactive unless we all gathered and took pictures. Then we would send these photos in the group. Kylie never came to meet with us again after the first time. However, she was able to view all the photos in our group, and this likely bothered her even more. One time, she shared a Facebook link to the group, asking me if this was me. Out of curiosity, I clicked it, discovering it was a photo from several years back, featuring my then high school boyfriend. We were hugging, and he had posted it while we were dating. I had entirely forgotten about the picture, and I had no idea how she located it, or why she would even share it with the group. But I wasn't going to avoid the truth, so I informed her that it was me, and he was an old boyfriend. Kylie responded at once, claiming I appeared awfully close, and I should ask my ex-boyfriend to take down this picture from his Facebook, as it was no longer appropriate. I was stunned by how absurd she sounded. Firstly, she had stalked me so extensively that she'd found my ex-boyfriend's page, then knowingly sent the photo linked to the group, and then she blamed me for it. Fortunately, Jack, who had likely been following our messages in the group, responded, stating this was a perfectly normal photo and that he had no problem with a photo shared years prior. Kylie responded passive-aggressively how he should date someone with better standards. I was so enraged reading her message that I would have pulled her hair out had she been standing before me. Jack replied to her that he indeed had better standards, as I earn more than 4 times her salary. I was aware this must have stung her since Kylie worked as a graphic designer, and her parents had noted how she didn't make enough to even move out. Kylie immediately left the group in a rage and later called Jack, yelling and weeping to him that he had no business insulting her in the group and that she was completely finished with us. Jack was unconcerned, and this made her even angrier. I'm unsure what transpired, but Jack's parents did phone and apologize to me in the evening. They informed me they had spoken with her and that she would improve going forward. They offered apologies on her behalf and told me they had absolutely no problem with the photo. It was quite uncomfortable discussing my ex-boyfriend from years prior with my in-laws, but I was glad that they were not similar to Kylie. After this incident, Kylie largely kept her distance from us. She never rejoined the group or troubled me again. A few months later, we were astonished to learn that she had run off with a man and wed in Vegas. Her parents were utterly stunned and infuriated that they had no idea who this man was, nor were they asked to the wedding. It emerged that Kylie had been seeing an older man, Isaac, who's 13 years older than her, for a considerable period. They met at work when Isaac was still married. This relationship resulted in Isaac's wife divorcing him. Once their divorce was complete, Kylie ran off with him knowing her parents would never permit her to marry an older divorcee or pardon her for having a liaison with a married man. She had concealed all of this from her parents for multiple years. She never even informed them of any of this, as they were already upset that he was significantly older than her. Jack and I only discovered Isaac's past when he looked up the man on his LinkedIn and Instagram. Aside from the affair aspect, we were pleased for her, hoping she would make a fresh start after their wedding, though we held back from reaching out to her. However, a few weeks later, I got an unexpected text from my sister-in-law. The message read something like this: I know I haven't been kind to you previously, and I wish to apologize. I must admit, I didn't completely embrace you as my family before, but now I've moved past the bias I held against you, and would like to get to know you more. I'd like to have dinner with you and Jack this weekend. Please let me know if you both are available. I showed the message to Jack, and he was hesitant about attending, but I believed this might offer an opportunity to resolve everything, and since she was offering a peace offering first, we talked it over, and I persuaded him to go. I also informed her that we would attend, and she appeared pleased about it. Upon meeting, Kylie cordially greeted us into her new home with Isaac. It was evident that Isaac was a prosperous individual, being considerably older than all of us. He owned a contemporary house filled with many devices, and Isaac, after introducing himself, proceeded to give my husband a tour of the residence. Isaac seemingly also possessed a special shelf for all his collected items. While the men were occupied, Kylie and I began conversing. She apologized for her conduct and informed me how she had altered after marrying Isaac. I smiled politely and assured her that it was all in the past. Kylie then proceeded to clarify why she disliked me. She told me how I had altered Jack and that he appeared more self-assured and content after knowing me. I noted to her how this was positive, but she claimed her brother had maintained limited contact with them for so long, yet only connected because of me, causing her to feel envious that I could prompt him to do such a thing. Even though what she shared made no sense to me, I merely nodded, as I wished to conclude this. Then she began speaking about how much more content she was now, enabling her to finally release her envy. She spoke about Isaac's wealth and that she would never need to work again. She mentioned his numerous assets and the number of cars he owned, despite me never inquiring about it. She then inquired about my work, and I informed her about my recent promotion and satisfying job. I truly enjoy designing, so at times I can talk extensively about my profession. Kylie promptly shifted the topic and began asking intrusive questions, such as when I intended to marry her brother. I informed her that we had discussed it but were in no rush, as we both believe things occur at the appropriate moment. Kylie sneered and told me this was utter nonsense, and that I had to urge Jack to propose to me, so I wouldn't become too old later for having children. This caused me to laugh, and I informed her that Jack and I never desired children and were content with the progression of our relationship. This made Kylie's eyes widen in astonishment, and she began asserting that as a woman, it was our obligation to bear children, even questioning why I was with Jack if I didn't wish to provide him with offspring. I felt quite annoyed by her intrusiveness, and told her that her brother and I were mature enough to determine what we desired. She then became angry and began shouting for Jack. When Jack and Isaac rushed into the room as I sat feeling stunned by her conduct, Kylie demanded Jack inform her if he had any inkling about the kind of woman he was marrying, given my lack of interest in extending his bloodline. Jack laughed at her remarks just as I had moments earlier, and asked her if she realized how absurd she sounded at that moment. Kylie became even angrier and raised her voice, declaring she would inform their parents and that they would never permit him to marry me. Jack shouted back that no one could prevent him from marrying me if he wished to, and that due to her self-centered and domineering conduct, he never wanted to ever reconnect with her. They were becoming more agitated, so I asked Jack if we could leave, and he assented. Isaac apologized to us numerous times while Kylie stood there glaring at me. Later, during our drive home, I burst out crying since I felt quite distressed by what she had told me. I seriously questioned Jack if he wanted to have children, but he assured me that he never desired one, and that I should not permit Kylie's outdated views to trouble my mind. He assured me that if he had desired anything else, I should not permit Kylie's outdated views to trouble my mind. He assured me that if he had wished for anything distinct, he would not even be by my side. I felt somewhat improved after that. I don't know if Kylie ever spoke to their parents about what I had conveyed to her, but fortunately, they never contacted me to say anything. Jack's parents have kept meeting with us whenever possible, and they have never mentioned anything she informed them of. Following this incident, I blocked Kylie from all my social media because I was genuinely finished with her. This year, Jack proposed to me at our preferred date location, and since that time, we have been occupied with our wedding arrangements. Our parents are very pleased for us and have offered their congratulations on our forthcoming marriage. Kylie learned about it from her parents and sent Jack a text message just stating, "I hope you know what you're doing," which annoyed him. I also felt sad that she had persisted in holding a resentment against me even now. Now, this is where things became even more intricate with her. 2 months ago, my fiancé had a headache and wasn't feeling well, so I decided to prepare his preferred meal. Realizing we were lacking a few ingredients, I decided to visit the grocery store. The first one I went to lacked all the items I required, so I wound up driving for a while until I found another store in a different area of town. As I was walking through the shopping complex on my way to the store, I passed by a cafe, and to my surprise, I noticed my sister-in-law getting close with some guy. At first I thought it might be Isaac, but after a second look, I realized the guy seemed closer to her age and had brown hair. They were holding hands and exchanging kisses, acting all giggly and talkative like teenagers. This was quite a surprise for me because, as far as I knew, my sister-in-law was still married to Isaac. If they had separated, my fiancé's parents would have certainly informed us. In a state of disbelief, I couldn't help but take a few pictures, as my eyes confirmed what I was witnessing. She didn't even notice me as she was so busy with the guy. Later, when I returned home, my hands were shaking. Jack knew something was wrong and came over to talk to me. I told him everything, and he was as taken aback as I was. He asked me 2 or 3 times if I was sure about what I had seen. I nodded yes, and even showed him the pictures. He examined each picture closely, asking 3 times if I was certain about what I had seen. I confirmed yes with a nod, and showed him the photos. He examined each picture closely and agreed that it was definitely not Isaac. He decided that it was important to inform Isaac about this, but I wasn't sure if this was a good idea, since I didn't want Kylie to fight with him again. He assured me that he would be careful and have a talk with Isaac, man to man, and told me how, as Kylie's husband, Isaac deserved to know the truth. That weekend, Jack talked to Isaac privately. It turned out that Isaac was shocked to learn that Kylie had been cheating on him with a much younger guy. But what was even more surprising is that Kylie is pregnant. Yes, pregnant. Apparently, they had just found out, and she had kept this a secret since then because she had been waiting for the right time to announce it. Isaac was floored that Kylie could do something like this to him, and was thankful to Jack for telling him. He begged us not to tell Kylie anything about this, and that he would take care of it soon. Jack agreed, and since then we have kept our noses out of it. Our wedding was last week. Jack's parents had convinced us to invite Kylie also since she was family, and told us how it would look bad if she was missing. We agreed just to shut them up, and I firmly told them that they needed to talk to her and make sure that she didn't make a scene at our wedding. His parents agreed, and we believed them. On the day of our wedding, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Our ceremony went well, and we moved on to the reception. When it was time for speeches, my parents gave a beautiful speech about me, and my dad teared up, saying how his baby girl had finally grown up. My dad likewise gave a speech and thanked me for uniting the family, which was very touching. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed my sister-in-law trying to take the microphone from my father-in-law. While it might appear harmless to others, I understood her sufficiently to avoid any risks. I had already alerted my bridesmaids to tell the DJ to turn off the microphone if my sister-in-law ever attempted to seize control. When Kylie tried to talk into the microphone, she soon noticed that her voice wasn't audible, and she looked around. Jack and I just pretended that we were unaware. Later, when my maid of honor, Marfa, retrieved the microphone from my sister-in-law and the DJ activated it, Kylie likely understood that we had intentionally silenced her. She began to yell in the middle of Marfa's speech about how we dared to prevent her from speaking and how she had a significant revelation. She attempted to seize the microphone from Marfa, who wouldn't hand it over. We then observed in dismay as Kylie angrily stood up on her chair and began to loudly declare how she had always known about my jealousy of her, that I was such a difficult bride for not allowing her to speak at my wedding. People observed her in bewilderment and astonishment, and she then proceeded to declare that she was pregnant and wished to disclose this today since she believed this was the ideal moment with all our dear ones assembled. She then smiled and surveyed the room, expecting people to begin congratulating her. However, everyone simply exchanged uneasy glances. Jack's parents appeared furious, murmuring to Kylie not to cause them further embarrassment and that she had to return to her seat, but this only made Kylie blush with shame. She looked at me and began to yell if I was pleased for doing this to my own husband's family, and that this is why she never wanted her brother to marry an immoral woman like me. Jack, who until that point had tried to remain calm for my sake, rose from his chair and looked like he was going to give her the thrashing of her life. However, before he could respond, Isaac, who was sitting beside Kylie, took the microphone from Marfa, and he apologized to us for Kylie's conduct, and then congratulated us on our wedding. Then he turned to Kylie and informed her that he never intended to do this publicly, but she deserved to be taught a lesson. Kylie stared at him in confusion while Isaac proceeded to state that it was true that Kylie was indeed pregnant, but that he was not the child's father. The crowd gasped, and I couldn't help but wince, aware of where this was heading. Kylie's expression soured. Isaac turned to her and declared, "Let's first determine who the father of your child is. Then concern yourself with the announcement," and gave her a smirk. Jack's parents, who had been quiet, inquired what he meant, and at this point he showed them photos from his phone, detailing how Kylie had been unfaithful to him for the past 2 months with a different man. Thankfully, Isaac never once threw me and Jack under the bus, and simply went on to explain how he had grown suspicious of her conduct and had hired a pie who had taken all these pictures. Jack's parents looked through the pictures in disgust and horror while the guests kept whispering. Kylie sat speechless throughout it all, perhaps attempting to grasp that she could no longer conceal the truth. Jack then took the opportunity and told Kylie to leave our wedding, stating that he was ashamed to be related to a woman like her. She burst into tears, holding Isaac's arm, and departed. After this debacle, we attempted to salvage the remainder of the wedding, but everyone was just too agitated by what Kylie had done to Isaac and us. All anyone could discuss was her affair and her pregnancy. It was quite embarrassing for us and Jack's parents as well. Since then, I have been receiving emails from random email addresses, which clearly are from my sister-in-law, threatening me that she wants to ruin me because she claims this is all my fault, and that I should have simply allowed her to announce her pregnancy so she would not have been publicly humiliated. I have shown these messages to Jack, and he thinks we have done nothing wrong, and this was entirely her own doing. He might be biased, so here I am asking Ida for being too harsh on my sister-in-law and not allowing her to announce her pregnancy. Update 1. Wow, when I put this out there, I hoped a few people would let me know if I had done anything wrong. Currently, there are hundreds of comments beneath my post referring to my sister-in-law as an AH. This post has exploded in just a few days. First off, thank you for confirming for me that she is as irrational as I've always believed her to be. To address some of your inquiries, yes, Isaac has let us know that he will be divorcing Kylie. Yes, I will be sending all the screenshots of her emails to Isaac, which will certainly be useful for his court proceedings. No, we haven't spoken with Jack's parents yet because we are still on our honeymoon, and this is quite a serious subject, so we intend to meet them in person for this discussion. Yes, my parents and my relatives were just as astonished as everyone, and my parents keep checking on me daily as they are unsettled by how Kylie acted towards me. Yes, my parents and my relatives were just as astonished as everyone, and my parents keep checking on me daily as they are unsettled by how Kylie acted towards me. I believe for such a long period, I had wished that she and I would become at least friendly, that I had neglected to perceive just how manipulative and narcissistic she genuinely is. It is only now, with my family highlighting it and assuring me of their support, that I feel sufficiently confident in my choice to remove her from our lives, even if Jack's parents might oppose it. Update 2. So, we were able to talk with Jack's parents now that we are back from our honeymoon. They are extremely embarrassed, to say the least. They have notified us that they had cut off Kylie, which was quite unexpected for us to hear. They went on to explain how Kylie wanted to move in with them since Isaac kicked her out, but they declined to even let her in. In the end, she had to go and stay with one of her friends. Jack told his parents that Kylie's actions at our wedding were unforgivable, and from this point on, we desired no contact with her whatsoever. Should they ever reconsider and wish for us to involve Kylie again, then we would also sever ties with them if necessary. Jack's mother began to weep, discussing how agonizing all of this was, and that she never anticipated Kylie would do something like this. I don't know how faithful they will stay to their promise, but I am glad that my husband is a straightforward individual, unlike myself, so I know he will never permit her back into our lives. I am glad that we are finished with Kylie entirely. Update 3. 8 months have passed since my last update, and I simply wanted to share that Isaac has at last divorced Kylie. Isaac told us that Kylie did admit to everything. In the end, she confessed that she had been seeing someone else, and it was purely physical, but she got pregnant. She never wanted a relationship with him, so she had hoped she could keep it secret. Since she was at fault for the affair and they had no children from their marriage, she wouldn't be getting any alimony from him. Because of this, Kylie pleaded with Isaac to let her keep one of his cars, at least as a keepsake, but Isaac refused. She then began crying about how she had no one to rely on during her pregnancy since the child's father had abandoned her as well. But Isaac told her it was none of his business anymore. We continue to keep in touch with Isaac despite his divorce. Jack and he have become closer in the past few months. They sometimes meet on weekends to play video games. Jack's parents haven't spoken to Kylie, so I'm guessing she is truly alone. For her child's sake, I hope she makes the right decisions moving forward. Let's move on to another unbelievable story. My wife Gigi and I have been together for the past 4 years. Our relationship has been pretty much perfect, or so I believed. We share similar interests, such as playing video games and going camping whenever we get a chance. We both have good-paying jobs, and we both never want children. Gigi is extremely independent, which is the primary reason why I fell in love with her in the first place. We dated for 10 months before we moved in together. Gigi and I had spoken about our past, and she knew that I strongly disliked people who cheat. She expressed the same sentiment and told me how her ex-boyfriend broke her heart when she found him cheating with one of his exes. I was glad that we were on the same page regarding this. I like being loyal and available to my partner, and Gigi was the same way initially. However, after we got engaged, something changed in her. One day while we were drinking, she brought up the subject of whether we could get one free pass in our relationship. At first, I didn't understand what she was talking about, but then she went on to explain how a free pass is basically when you are allowed to sleep with a celebrity or someone whom you find extremely attractive, and your partner won't consider it cheating. She asked me if I would ever consider having a free pass in our relationship. I laughed and shook my head, as this thought had never even crossed my mind. I told her a free pass is nothing more than cheating, and if she ever wanted a free pass, then I would prefer that she left me. Hearing this, Gigi went quiet, and we continued to drink. I didn't give this much thought after that day, however. I believe this was the first red flag in our relationship. Months later, Gigi approached me saying she had a colleague who was extremely attractive and had been persistently asking her out for quite some time, and one day during their office party, she had given in and kissed him simply to silence him. She told me that she had felt really guilty about it and wanted to tell me, but her friends had discouraged her from telling me the truth since they thought that I would not understand. My first thought was that what this guy did was essentially coercion, so I told her that she needed to report him immediately and that she could lodge an HR complaint against him because this is a very serious matter. However, Gigi tried to dismiss it, saying that it wasn't a major issue, which made me somewhat suspicious. I asked her why she even told me this, if she thought it wasn't a big deal in the first place. Gigi told me how she thought she wanted me to jump into action and perhaps handle the situation myself by confronting the guy, just as all her exes had done, and that she found it unappealing to see that I wanted her to go to HR instead. My wife Gigi and I have been together for the past 4 years. Our relationship has been pretty much perfect, or so I believed. We share similar interests, such as playing video games and going camping whenever we get a chance. We both have good-paying jobs, and we both never want children. Gigi is extremely independent, which is the primary reason why I fell in love with her in the first place. We dated for 10 months before we moved in together. Gigi and I had spoken about our past, and she knew that I strongly disliked people who cheat. She expressed the same sentiment and told me how her ex-boyfriend broke her heart when she found him cheating with one of his exes. I was glad that we were on the same page regarding this. I like being loyal and available to my partner, and Gigi was the same way initially. However, after we got engaged, something changed in her. One day while we were drinking, she brought up the subject of whether we could get one free pass in our relationship. At first, I didn't understand what she was talking about, but then she went on to explain how a free pass is basically when you are allowed to sleep with a celebrity or someone whom you find extremely attractive, and your partner won't consider it cheating. She asked me if I would ever consider having a free pass in our relationship. I laughed and shook my head, as this thought had never even crossed my mind. She then grumbled that I didn't love her enough and how she would have confronted the woman if I had ever kissed someone else. At this point, I could not understand why Gigi was twisting the situation like this. It felt like I was being manipulated into a scenario that made no sense. How could she expect me to react the same way as her exes? It was as if she couldn't handle the idea of me dealing with the situation in a rational and responsible manner. Her insistence on making a test of my love for her left a bitter taste in my mouth. I told her firmly that if she didn't report this to HR, then I would assume that she had kissed the guy out of her own free will and not because she was coerced to do so, which means it was cheating, and I could not marry someone like that. Hearing this, Gigi's expression shifted from frustration to disbelief. She asked me if I was serious, and I nodded, reiterating that I couldn't handle cheating. We did argue for a bit, where she kept saying how everyone would look at her differently if she complained against the guy and outed him, but I didn't care, and I reminded her that she should not care either, if what she had told me was true. In the end, she reported to HR, and apparently it was a big deal, just as anyone would expect. They ended up firing the guy and assured Gigi that she did the right thing. I was glad that Gigi stood up for herself. However, a week later, I received a message from a stranger. He stated that he was the man Gigi had kissed. In his message, he had written that Gigi had kissed him with her own consent and that he never did anything wrong. He alleged that Gigi apparently never wore her engagement ring in the office, so he had no idea she was even engaged, nor did her friends ever mention it, which is why he had thought it was acceptable to pursue her. He told me that he wanted nothing from me except to just inform me of the truth and apologize for kissing my girlfriend. Obviously, I never replied to his message because this guy had been fired anyway, and at that time, I believed Gigi over him. 2 months later, Gigi and I were married at our dream venue. It was a beautiful ceremony, and we exchanged our vows in front of our parents and the rest of our families. The beginning of our marital life was pure bliss. Everything was progressing smoothly until I discovered something incriminating on her laptop. One day, while she was out grocery shopping, my laptop was charging upstairs. So I opened her laptop to check our flight details since our trip was approaching. In Safari, under Frequently Visited, I saw a Reddit account page that piqued my curiosity, and I clicked on it without much thought. This is how I discovered that Gigi had this Reddit account, which she had never mentioned to me, where she would exchange inappropriate pictures with a random stranger. I went through the pictures, and in all of her pictures, she had cropped out her face, and he had done the same. Their messages were not affectionate either and were purely sexual. But what shocked me was how she had brazenly discussed our sex life with this total stranger. I was at a loss for words. When she came back, I confronted her, and she turned white as a ghost when she realized I had discovered her account. I asked her to explain her actions because I was so repulsed by the pictures. She paused for a moment, her eyes flickering nervously before finally meeting mine, and then slowly and tentatively she began to speak. She admitted she found it thrilling to send her pictures to a stranger and to have conversations with him that she knew were off limits. She told me how it was essentially like pornography and that it held no significance for her. She attempted to justify, saying how she had never professed any love for him and that sending pictures with her face cropped out wasn't a major issue because he would never find out her true identity. I found it difficult to grasp her reasoning, to understand what would cause her to act this way. I asked her why she felt the need to do this, if it was because she wasn't content in our marriage. But Gigi shook her head emphatically, her eyes begging for understanding as she attempted to argue that it wasn't like that, and that this was just a foolish thing that held no meaning for her. She kept saying that she loved me and pleaded with me to let this go, as this was nothing more than an embarrassing incident, and promised me that she would delete the Reddit account immediately. I wanted to scream, to erupt in fury and frustration, but instead I remained silent as I tried to process this new information. There was nothing left to say, no words that could undo the damage that had been done. I must confess that after this, our sex life certainly suffered because I felt so betrayed and hurt. I struggled to find the desire to be close to her, to lower my guard and allow myself to be vulnerable again. The thought of being intimate with her filled me with a sense of dread. Gigi sensed my hesitation, my reluctance to bridge the divide that had grown between us. She tried to reach out, to mend what was broken, but her efforts were not enough. Every time I looked at her, I could picture her messages with the guy in my head, and it truly didn't help. Just a week after this, I received even worse news. While I was at the office one morning, my parents had been involved in a car accident and were critically injured. I couldn't believe it, and it was as if the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath my feet, leaving me suspended in a void of shock and despair. I rushed to the hospital to check on my parents as fast as I could. I was informed by the doctors that they were on life support because their organs were failing. The doctors told me frankly that the chance of them surviving this was less than 50%. I remember just sitting in the waiting room for hours on end, hoping that they would miraculously wake up. Gigi did come and sit by my side in silence, holding my hand. I kept praying fervently for a miracle, for some sign of improvement, but my parents' condition never improved. My mother was the first one to go, and she was quickly followed by my father. The only thing that reassured me was that even in their death, they could be together. I collapsed on the ground, just crying until my tears ran dry. My heart was shattered into a million irreparable pieces, and I did not know how to go on living after this. The funeral was really difficult for me, because I just didn't know how to maintain my composure in front of others. I have to admit that during this time, Gigi took care of everything. She allowed me to mourn over the loss of my parents, while she made all the arrangements. In the aftermath of their funeral, I withdrew into myself, cocooned in a shell of numbness, unable to articulate the magnitude of my pain. I found myself trapped in a suffocating embrace of grief and depression. I did not have the energy to even complete simple tasks, and would lie in bed the whole day, mourning my parents and my childhood. My parents had been my rock, and losing them felt like I had lost a part of myself too. I did meet with my parents' lawyers, who informed me that my parents had left me everything they owned, which wasn't surprising, honestly, but what did surprise me was that the total assets amounted to $2 million. I was shocked, but then it made me even sadder, realizing my parents had worked hard their entire lives, yet they didn't live long enough to enjoy it. I never told Gigi or any of my family about my inheritance because I didn't even have the right state of mind at the time to think about the money. However, I decided to take a long leave of absence from my company, now that I didn't truly have to worry about money. And since I'd been a loyal employee for a long time, my boss graciously agreed to give me the break I needed to grieve my parents. However, just 2 weeks after my parents passed away, Gigi approached me one evening and told me she wanted to talk about something really important. We sat down in the living room where she started to tell me she'd had enough of seeing me mope around, and that I needed to get my ass up and go to therapy. Gigi told me my behavior wasn't normal, and that nobody mourns so much over the loss of their parents. She asked me to man up and stop crying. I was shocked by how cruel her words were, so I tried to reason with her that my grief was not a choice, and that grieving for my dead parents for a month is perfectly normal for any human being. I reminded her that she had grieved for her childhood dog for months on end, and I had never questioned her, so she had no right to treat me this way. She was pissed and grumbled about how unattractive it was to watch me cry. There was more back and forth, but eventually she let it go, so I thought this would be the end of it. Recently, my cousin Joseph messaged me asking if I was doing well. Joseph and I had been pretty close growing up, so it wasn't unusual for him to check up on me. However, he then went on to ask if my wife and I were currently separated. I was confused by his question, and I replied that my wife and I were still together. I didn't think much of his inquiry at the time, chalking it up to curiosity or maybe even concern, but he then called me immediately, so I picked up his call. Joseph went on to tell me that he had just spotted my wife coming out of a hotel with a man, and that the man and my wife had hugged each other tightly before walking away in opposite directions. He told me that the way they hugged each other was not like the way friends do, which is why he had questioned me as to whether me and Gigi were still together. I reiterated that she and I were very much together, and I assured him that when she came back home, I would ask her about it. However, my cousin, being the more paranoid one, dissuaded me from asking her. He told me that it was better for me to go through her phone and check if she was cheating on me because, according to him, if she was already sleeping with this guy, there was a chance that she wouldn't even accept it. I hate to admit it, but his words made sense since Gigi did kiss a coworker, and had even shared inappropriate pictures with a total stranger. So I thought it was better for me to investigate a little before confronting her, and that's exactly what I did. I went through her laptop and her phone, but I found nothing. There were no inappropriate messages or calls to anyone. I was beginning to doubt my cousin and thought maybe he had mistaken someone else for Gigi. However, that weekend, while me and Gigi were sitting on the sofa watching TV, I heard a phone vibrating. I looked around and noticed that neither my phone nor her phone had received any notifications. Gigi must have seen me looking around because she suddenly excused herself to go to the washroom. I racked my brain in confusion as I was absolutely sure that I had heard a phone vibrating, and this is when it struck me that maybe Gigi had another phone. When she came out of the washroom, I noticed a phone-shaped bulge in the side pocket of her sweatpants, which pretty much confirmed my suspicion. The fact that my wife had bought another phone and had not even informed me was suspicious from the start. But now that I knew she had received a message and rushed to the washroom, I had even more reason to believe that she was, in fact, cheating on me. However, like last time, I didn't just want to confront her. This time, I wanted to catch her in the act and confront the guy so I could find out his side of the story too. I talked with my cousin, who immediately agreed with my plan. He told me about the hotel where she had met with this guy, so throughout the week, I waited patiently around the hotel to catch her in the act. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday passed, but she wasn't seen, so I assumed maybe she was meeting up with the guy at another hotel. On Thursday, things worked in my favor. I saw my wife entering the hotel in the afternoon, which was supposed to be her lunchtime, and immediately behind her was another guy whom I felt I had seen somewhere, but I just couldn't place him. I waited 15 minutes before entering after them. I informed the receptionist I was waiting for a guest. He offered to call the room, but I chuckled and told him it wasn't needed. 40 minutes later, I saw them exiting the elevator together, their faces flushed with excitement and anticipation. My heart sank as I watched them, knowing what I was about to confront. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I approached them, my hands trembling with anger and betrayal. My wife's eyes widened in shock as she saw me, and she froze in her tracks. Before she could utter a word, I held up my hand, silencing her protest. I didn't need her excuses. I had seen enough. Turning to the man beside her, I asked him if he knew who I was. He nodded and told me that he had seen me at the office Christmas party last year, and that I was apparently her ex-husband since she had told him that we were currently separated. I stared at him blankly as he proceeded to tell me that he would never have gotten involved with her in any way if he knew that she was still married. I asked him if he worked with Gigi, and he nodded, telling me that they were co-workers. Anger surged through me like wildfire as I realized that my wife had once again cheated on me with a coworker. Without a word, I turned on my heels and walked away, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. As I drove home, the weight of what I had witnessed settled over me like a suffocating blanket. My marriage was over, shattered beyond repair by the betrayal of the woman I had loved and trusted above all others. When I reached home, I started packing my bags immediately. I was so angry and heartbroken with everything going on in my life. Gigi had apparently driven after me, so she walked into the house, huffing and puffing. She found me packing my bags upstairs and immediately confronted me. She told me she had made a terrible mistake and pleaded for my forgiveness. She added that she had felt so lonely, and in her desperation, she decided to lie to this coworker about us being separated since she didn't want to be known as a cheating wife around her office. She told me she had wanted to come clean to me for a long time, but was afraid of my reaction. I yelled at her to get out of my face, as I just couldn't stand to hear any more of her lies. I knew for sure that had I not caught her red-handed that day, she would have continued to sleep with him. Gigi then changed her tactics and started claiming I couldn't blame her entirely for everything and that I needed to accept this was also my fault. I stopped packing and looked at her because I couldn't believe her audacity to even suggest such a thing. She then went on to tell how I hadn't slept with her for months on end after I found her messages on Reddit. And this had continued even after my parents passed away. I was so furious that I yelled at her that she had no right to blame me for her betrayal, and that her actions were a choice she made, regardless of the circumstances. I couldn't believe she was trying to push the blame onto me as if my grief and pain was somehow responsible for her infidelity. But Gigi kept insisting, her words cutting through the air like a knife. She accused me of neglecting her and of failing to fulfill my duties as a husband. She told me that I had become too boring while grieving my parents' death, and went on to suggest that instead of walking out of the marriage, I should instead understand her perspective. She even went on to demand that we should think about opening up our marriage, and that I was welcome to date other people if that was what I wanted. Hearing her words, I simply scoffed because I was so done with this woman. I packed my bag, and before leaving, I informed her that I would be sending her the divorce papers. Currently, I'm staying with my cousin, and Gigi has called me 1,000,000 times. Her messages range from apologizing to blaming me for ruining everything. She keeps saying that I should see things from her perspective and forgive her since she was just lonely. So here I am, Reddit, wondering if I'm the a-hole here. Am I to be blamed for pushing my wife to cheat on me just because I was mourning? Update 1. Wow. When I posted this, I thought this post wouldn't even gain traction, but seeing over 300 comments under my post has been mind-reeling. I didn't think my story was even that interesting, but watching you all fight in the comments has been entertaining. To all the people who are blaming me and saying I pushed my wife to cheat by not sleeping with her, well, I hope, for your sake, you never find yourself in a predicament like I did. I loved my wife and assumed she would never cheat on me, so when I discovered her inappropriate messages with a random stranger, it truly affected me emotionally and mentally. I couldn't simply overlook everything and be intimate with her, as if nothing had changed. A fortnight later, when my parents passed away, being intimate with my wife was the furthest thing from my mind. It's as if some of you have never experienced grief, because if you have, you'll understand that everyone reacts differently, and losing my parents has been incredibly crushing throughout all this. If my wife cannot remain loyal to me and prefers to be intimate with someone else, then this is in no way my fault. Indeed, I felt a little guilty at first, but after speaking with my cousins and reviewing some of the comments, I am certain this is entirely my wife's responsibility. She chose to be unfaithful because that was what she desired. I have no regrets about ending this marriage, and I've already spoken with my divorce lawyer about all the details, so we'll proceed with my decision. I also had a discussion with my in-laws, Gigi's parents. They were unaware she had been unfaithful, as she had conveniently omitted that detail, and simply informed them that I had left because I was still grieving over my parents. I apprised them of all that had occurred, and they were equally as furious with Gigi as I was. They have since assured me of their trust in my decision-making. Update 2. It has been 5 months since my previous update. I apologize for the delay in updating. I've been quite occupied with all the legal proceedings for my divorce. I'm here to finally share some good news. Gigi and I are officially divorced. That selfish woman attempted to claim my assets during the divorce proceedings, but fortunately, my lawyer managed to prove she cheated on me, enabling me to safeguard my assets, including the $2 million inheritance from my parents. Gigi, who had no prior knowledge that my parents had bequeathed me such a substantial sum, attempted to assert she rightfully deserved half of it. However, the judge wouldn't allow it and rejected her outright. I've wasted no time in moving forward with my life. Shortly after I moved out, I encountered an amazing woman named Sarah on Bumble. She's a single mother who is truly wonderful and has a delightful son named Jerry. Sarah lost her husband a year prior, so she comprehends the pain of loss and grief I've been experiencing. We've connected on a profound level, bonding over our common experiences and our shared aspiration to establish a happy, loving home for our families. Sarah is incredibly hardworking, and her resilience and strength inspire me daily. I also admire how she single-handedly cares for her son. Jerry is a splendid boy, full of vigor and curiosity, and it's been a delight getting to know him. I'm fortunate and immensely grateful that both of them have welcomed me into their lives. Meanwhile, I've relocated from my cousin's place and secured a pleasant condo for myself. I've also gone back to my job because I enjoy working there, and I don't wish to stay idle at home. It's taken me some time to adjust to living solo, but I must confess I don't dislike it. Indeed, it can get lonely at times, but I'd prefer to be by myself than with an unfaithful partner. I've also been consulting a therapist to help me heal from my parents' passing and my history with Gigi, allowing me to focus on creating a better future. I certainly miss my parents daily, and I hope they are proud of me for ending a toxic marriage. I know my mother, in particular, would have been enraged with Gigi for betraying me. Furthermore, several of you messaged me after my initial update, advising me to get an STD test, which I did, and fortunately, the results were negative. It was a relief to have that reassurance, knowing I hadn't been subjected to any further risks because of Gigi's unfaithfulness. Since the divorce, and even throughout our divorce proceedings, Gigi has made multiple efforts to contact me, expressing her regret. I've made it quite clear to her that I've forgiven her for her past errors, as there's no use in harboring resentment any longer. Nonetheless, she has also attempted to arrange a meeting with me after the divorce, and I promptly rebuffed her, stating firmly that I have no desire to revive our relationship. I've informed her that it's time for both of us to move forward. I hope she comprehends that and ceases to bother me. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and as many of you have continued to request one, I wanted to let you know that just recently I took the next step in our relationship and proposed to Sarah. To my delight, she accepted, and we are now planning our future together as a family. I couldn't be more thrilled to embark on this new chapter of my life with Sarah and Jerry beside me. However, this isn't the sole update I have. Apparently, Gigi has been monitoring Sarah and me on social media since our divorce, which I was unaware of because the very evening Sarah posted our engagement pictures, Gigi attempted to contact me multiple times. I declined to answer her call, so she then sent me numerous messages inquiring if it was true and asserting that Sarah was merely a gold digger who didn't truly love me. I blocked her because her messages infuriated me, and I saw no reason to remain in contact with her. Nevertheless, this woman then proceeded to send me a lengthy email where she asserted that I had deceived her the entire time and that I was solely to blame for destroying our marriage. She claimed she had loved me profoundly, but I had broken her heart by not trusting her sufficiently. She held me responsible for divorcing her without even attempting to reconcile and implored me not to marry Sarah, who was seemingly very wrong for me. She wrote that she couldn't believe I was back on my feet, and that Sarah would receive a much happier version of me. In her view, I was the one who got away. I felt drained reading her email as this woman sounded deranged, repeating the same points incessantly. I've blocked her on Gmail, so hopefully she won't create another email address just to harass me. Reflecting on everything that transpired, I now recognize that I wasn't the one who got away. I was the one who escaped. I'm thankful that I could break free from a toxic relationship founded on deceit and betrayal. And now I'm finally at liberty to live my life on my own terms, with a partner who loves and respects me for who I am. With Sarah, I've discovered a love that is authentic, unconditional, and built upon a foundation of trust and mutual respect. Together, we're constructing a future brimming with love, laughter, and limitless possibilities. And for that, I am truly appreciative. To anyone experiencing a similar situation, my advice is straightforward. Never settle for anything less than you deserve. Trust your intuition and never be afraid to depart from a situation that no longer benefits you. Life is too brief to squander on individuals who don't value you. Next story. My boyfriend Justin and I have been a couple for just over 7 months, though we started dating a couple months before that. So altogether, I've known him less than a year, and I'm already completely smitten with him, feeling as though I've known him always. I know this is still our honeymoon period, but I've truly never felt this deeply about another man, and I've certainly never considered things as long-term as I am with him. Justin is confident, charismatic, passionate and driven, intelligent and emotionally mature. He values his family, is particularly kind to children and elderly individuals, and simply possesses a presence that brightens any room. It also doesn't hurt that he's 6 feet 1 inch, handsome, possesses a yummy body, and is an amazing lover. Anyway, LOL, the only actual issue in our relationship from my perspective is his friendship with Olivia, 24F, whom he's known since her first year of university, 6 years ago. My boyfriend is clever with women, accustomed to attention, and doesn't cross boundaries with them. The only time he gets close is with Olivia, and even then it's primarily her initiating things. But the way she acts around him is honestly the leading cause of conflict in our relationship. I'm quite friendly with Justin's friend group now, and I spend time with them at least once per week, so situations can become quite uncomfortable for me. Among the things that make me uncomfortable, she is precisely my boyfriend's type, which I know isn't really her fault. I've noticed a few girls my boyfriend has dated from his social media, and they all look quite similar to Olivia. She's 170 centimeters, 5'8", athletically built, has cat eyes and a pouty mouth, and just exudes a sexy vibe. I'm 160 5'3", fit, and have a pleasant face, but first, it bothers me that I'm far from Justin's type, and second, that Olivia is his type. Olivia has always been polite enough to me, but when I first met her, she gave me a raised eyebrow. Let's see how long you last. Sort of look. I admit I could be overanalyzing this situation. She's always constantly seeking reasons to touch Justin. An example is brushing food off his clothes or his face. Hello, that's my role. Or adjusting his shirt collar. She also enjoys giving him hugs from behind. Once she hugged him from behind, and I overheard her asking, "Why don't you ever give me hugs from behind anymore?" The way she said it was soft and hushed, and it really unsettled me. I'm 99% sure an unbiased observer could have perceived her tone as seductive. I'm 99% sure an unbiased observer could have perceived her tone as seductive. When I mentioned it to Justin, all he said was, "Yeah, that was a bit odd, I guess." She has this sweet little act she performs for Justin when he doesn't want to do something for her. Sometimes, and this is probably strange in itself, she'll request him to purchase something for her, like an ice cream, and when he says no, she'll stand in front of him, pout, and give him puppy dog eyes. Or sometimes she simply takes hold of him and directs him toward whatever she desires, points to it, and performs the sweet act. She greets him by saying, "Hey you," and winking and playfully shooting him. Justin only pays attention to Olivia. He's quite a stubborn person and doesn't typically heed others, unless it's Olivia. One of the incidents that troubles me most in this respect is an event that occurred at a club. Justin and I were having drinks with his friends when another group of individuals began arguing with some of Justin's male friends. Justin initially attempted to calm the situation, but the other men were highly disrespectful, and he was about to fight 3 guys simultaneously. I repeatedly told him to leave them be, but he simply wouldn't yield, even after the bartender warned he'd call the police. Then Olivia approaches him, pulls him by the arm, and shouts at him, "Stop! You're behaving foolishly!" She pulled him to the bar, and they spoke there privately for 15 minutes. I know I probably should have gone and checked on him, but I was quite shocked and angry given what had just occurred. One of Justin's friends noticed me observing and told me, "Don't feel bad. It's always been like this with them," which naturally made me feel worse. Yesterday we went to dinner with them, which obviously made me feel worse. Yesterday we went to dinner with his friends. The day was rather warm, so Justin was just wearing a t-shirt, but by the time we concluded it was windy and noticeably colder. We decided to take a stroll along the Riverwalk, and Olivia unexpectedly draped her cardigan over my boyfriend's shoulders. He began to joke and pose like a model before returning it, but I somewhat wished he had simply handed it back to her immediately. There are numerous instances like these where Olivia performs minor, thoughtful gestures for him, things a girlfriend typically does. My female intuition simply tells me that Olivia desires more from Justin than he's offering her. She's sarcastic and impolite to him half the time, as that's their usual dynamic or simply her nature. However, when he isn't giving her his attention, I occasionally catch her taking furtive glances at him. At times she appears infatuated, at times overtly lustful, and at times sorrowful. I believe it's apparent she has feelings for him, but when I raised it with my boyfriend, he told me they were merely close. There's much more to add, but I'll conclude with this. I understand that some individuals are naturally flirtatious, but Olivia doesn't behave this way with any other men in their circle. Her personality is quite assertive. She's sarcastic and ceaselessly teases them, but no touching, no cutesy behavior, none of the minor considerate actions, and certainly none of the misty-eyed stares. Some of the guys even jokingly lament that they're envious because she only acts like a girl towards Justin. Yesterday, after the cardigan incident, when Justin dropped me off, I asked him to talk because I've been feeling increasingly insecure about his friendship with Olivia. We spoke in my apartment for about an hour regarding it and didn't truly make much headway. Essentially, he agreed not to meet Olivia alone, but stated that she was significant to him, recounted some things they helped each other navigate in university, and that he wished her to remain in his life. I tried to initiate sex with him after that, but he said he was tired and left. I cried after that and called my older sister to talk about the situation. She told me that since Justin hasn't done anything to betray my trust, I should continue trusting him, and that there's a reason he's with me and not Olivia. She also said that if he crosses the line, I need to be strong enough to leave him. I also called my best friend this morning. She, by contrast, is certain that Justin and Olivia were or are more than just close. She thinks I need to give him an ultimatum. Choose the friendship or the relationship. Basically, I'm at a loss for what to do now. I love Justin and truly believe we have a future together, but this friendship with Olivia is driving me crazy. Is this just jealousy or my insecurities, or do I truly need to give my boyfriend an ultimatum? I truly like him, but I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable in this relationship as long as Olivia is a part of his life. Update. I appreciate all your replies. I've tried to respond to as many as I could. After reading your comments, reviewing my own post, and doing some self-reflection, I've come to realize that much of the problem stems from my insecurities and fears regarding what might be occurring or what could happen later on. I'm not sure why it's been so difficult for me to stop justifying these fears and accept that they don't truly reflect what's actually taking place. Nonetheless, even though I realize that many of the uncomfortable feelings I've experienced are purely a result of my intuition, there are still various things Olivia does with my boyfriend that I'm personally not comfortable with. I understand it was incorrect of me to even consider asking Justin to distance himself from her. However, simultaneously, if they are truly that close and only platonic feelings are involved, I believe that, first, My boyfriend shouldn't have an issue establishing reasonable boundaries with a female friend whose actions make his girlfriend uneasy. And second, that female friend should comprehend and honor those requests. I realize that some of the things that trouble me, such as her charming act or certain other affectionate gestures, might simply be part of her demeanor toward him, and that I'll likely just have to accept and manage it. But for me, it's reasonable for him to ask that she stop the intimate physical stuff, like the back hugs, grabbing his arm incessantly, brushing his hair/face, clothes, etc. Justin and I haven't spoken much today, but I'm meeting him later tonight, and I will tell him exactly what I've written above. I'm not going to ask him to stop being friends with her, and I'm not going to ask him to distance himself from her. I'm also going to ask him to clarify some things for me, like the extent of their physical relationship / if there's any romantic history between them that I'm not aware of. Some people might have a problem with this, but I think that given the nature of their relationship / the fact that they see each other so often, he should be transparent about it. I think this conversation will help me decide whether a compromise can be made and I can learn to deal with their friendship healthily, or if I will have to do the hard thing and walk away, which I really, really don't want to do. Update: I met Justin the night after I added the edit to the original post, with the intentions of telling him that I was wrong for wanting him to distance himself from Olivia, but that I wanted, 1, for him to ask that she tone down the physical intimacy, and 2, that he disclose the extent of their past relationship, meaning how far their physical relationship went, or if either had confessed romantic feelings, something I'd wondered about before but always avoided asking him. That conversation didn't go as planned at all. I thought he'd be understanding and honest about his feelings, but he stonewalled me and was really rude and an all-around asshole to me. The moment I brought up Olivia, he laughed, shook his head, and asked if I was really going to do this shit again. I tried my best not to get emotional and just explain my point of view. The whole time he was leaning his head against the wall, didn't make eye contact, and was playing with his earrings. So when I asked if he understood my feelings and was okay with what I was asking of him, he smiled sarcastically and said, "Of course, honey," with a fake tone. He became extremely angry when I asked if they had hooked up before. His exact words were, "You haven't even been my GF for a year. If you think you're entitled to know every little detail from my past, fuck yourself." He walked out after saying that, and I cried. He'd never spoken to me like that or expressed anger towards me before. I was shocked, hurt, and angry. Clearly, he was concealing something. I wasn't sure if something had occurred between them, or if he had feelings for her, or what exactly, but I wanted to speak with him again, so I texted him, explaining I wasn't trying to anger him, but that I felt we needed another conversation. He didn't respond to my messages that evening, and by the next morning he still hadn't replied. I never imagined I'd do this, but I sent Olivia a message asking to meet for coffee. To my surprise, she responded almost at once and agreed to meet that afternoon. When we met, I shared my feelings about their relationship, how Justin had reacted the previous night, and directly asked her if there were any romantic feelings between them. She confessed that she had feelings for Justin, but added that it was complicated. She mentioned she loved him and hated him simultaneously. She advised me that I should leave him, that she wasn't merely saying that because she wished to be with him instead of me, but rather because Justin had always been a player, had been charming and abandoning girls for years, that she'd waited for him to change, that she knew she could never genuinely be happy staying by his side as a friend, that she ought to leave him too, but couldn't. I thought she might try to deceive me, but she appeared very sincere when stating these things. I asked her about the extent of their past relationship, and she told me that essentially she was attracted to Justin the moment they first met in university, but Justin had a long-distance girlfriend at the time. Justin ended things with his long-distance girlfriend. They grew closer. Justin had some problems, which she wouldn't disclose, that he discussed with her, and this resulted in them kissing one night and having sex. That was her first time. She admitted her feelings to Justin, but he said he didn't want their friendship to suffer if the relationship failed. They were on and off friends with benefits throughout college. Justin had a few brief relationships during that period, and he was unfaithful to one of his girlfriends with Olivia. She asserted at this point that they hadn't had sex since he'd been in a relationship with me, which I was inclined to believe. When they graduated, their friend group rented a vacation guest house on an island. One night, their friend Ashley discovered them in the bathroom. Justin told Ashley it was an intoxicated mistake. Olivia was deeply hurt and refused to see or communicate with Justin for weeks. Following being ignored, Justin apologized to her, told her he had feelings for her, and they went on a few clandestine dates. But Justin never committed to a relationship and then recanted, stating he was confused about his feelings, not ready for anything serious. From that moment forward, they reverted to being friends with benefits until Justin met me. I'm a little confused and skeptical about why she's told me all this, so I ask if she has any proof. She looks through chat logs and shows me multiple messages of him booty calling her. She starts getting emotional and tells me that Justin has amazing qualities, but that he has some deep personal issues that he refuses to work on, which prevent him from being a good partner right now. I asked her what she meant, but she wouldn't tell me. I could tell that she cares about him a lot. She's been single all this time. There were likely many opportunities for her to end up in a happy relationship, but she turned a blind eye to them all for Justin, who can't even admit that he has feelings for her. Even though I didn't like some of the things she did before, I actually sympathize with her a lot. It sounds like Justin put her through a ton of shit, given her false hope and taken it away, and she's always stayed by him for whatever reason. Afterward, she tells me not to worry about throwing her under the bus, because she was going to tell Justin herself that she told me about them. She said she wanted him to be mad at her. Later that night, Justin called me trying to explain himself, but I broke up with him. I was crying on the phone. I really didn't want to break up, but I knew it was the right thing for me to do. Regardless of what was true or false about his past, it was just too much drama for me to handle, and the way he reacted to me when I had originally wanted to talk to him scared me. He didn't try to fight me or ask me to stay. We just sat in silence on the phone for a while before hanging up. It's been around 2 weeks since then. I know that Justin was probably a bad boy, and it was only a matter of time before he broke my heart. Yet I feel devastated. I'm just beginning to get back into my normal routines, but even so, sometimes it's really hard to get out of bed. I think about Justin every day. It's as if the more I'm away from him, the more I think about the good things we had together. I miss his smell, his laugh, his touch, and simply being able to be with him whenever I want. Part of me hoped he would reach out to me, but he hasn't. I met Olivia last week, and she told me that Justin was no longer speaking to her, and that it was likely a good time for her to move on from him. My ass. Last night, I saw Olivia uploaded a coupley picture of her and Justin on Instagram. They were in a nightclub or some dark place. He had his arm wrapped around her with a drink in his hand, and she was sipping from the straw. I know it was a mistake not to block and unfollow Justin and his friends. After I saw that, I blocked and unfollowed them all. That was what prompted me to post an update. I don't know if Olivia played me or if Justin is charming her again, but I just feel terrible overall. It hurts. But I know these people would have been toxic for me if I had stayed with him. It just hurts so much more than I'd imagined. My boyfriend says his chronic pain prevents him from doing chores and going out with me, yet he can still go kayaking with friends and enjoy himself whenever he wishes. I, 26F, have been with my boyfriend, 30M, for just under 2 years. During the time we've been together, his chronic pain, which isn't linked to any specific or known condition because he won't see a doctor, has progressively worsened. It's reached a point where he's nearly unable to do chores or home projects, is typically too exhausted or in pain to make or agree to plans, and getting him to do anything outside the house with me is like pulling teeth. His excuses always center around his pain and fatigue. I've never experienced chronic pain, and thankfully, so I'm not one to judge or accuse someone of fabricating it, especially since the pain itself is invisible and my boyfriend appears perfectly healthy. However, he's now been unemployed for about 4 months, and I'm starting to question things. I'm starting to feel skeptical for several reasons. Primarily, that A. He never declines his friends' invitations to socialize, even when the activity is physically demanding, like kayaking, hiking, or attending a music festival. And B. He is never too tired or in too much pain to have sex. Over time, it's almost made it seem like he's conveniently in an unbearable amount of pain when he has to do something he's not very interested in, such as household tasks. And I'm starting to feel hurt that he just appears unwilling to spend time with me beyond what we do, lounging around the house. I've never accused him of pretending or overstating his pain, but I have attempted to discuss doing more enjoyable activities together, and it always reverts to his pain or him accusing me of attempting to prevent him from spending time with his friends, which I'm not trying to do in any way. I've done extensive research into autoimmune disorders and other conditions that might be causing his issue, always presenting my findings and recommendations to him, but he just doesn't trust that a doctor or any conventional medicine will assist him. I'm also troubled because when we attend family gatherings or parties that we're both invited to, it's rare, but it does happen. He will talk endlessly to anyone who will listen about the severity of his chronic pain and how frustrating it is to be unable to find a remedy. The problem is he's not genuinely seeking a solution. He just smokes weed every day and considers that sufficient, while lamenting and complaining about his body's condition. He also declines to go back to work due to his pain. For more context, he appears to have very severe muscle spasms and tightness, especially in his back. I'm glad to support him during difficult times, but his refusal to work is becoming worrying, and I feel extremely trapped. I'm not keen on backing him financially over the long term, but currently I am, in part, by handling some of his costs. If this post makes me a complete jerk for doubting the extent of my boyfriend's chronic pain, then so be it. I simply need assistance and responses. So here are my inquiries. What should I do next? Do you believe it's possible my boyfriend is utilizing his pain as an excuse? Should I implement some form of ultimatum that will ensure he gets medical care or attention? Your counsel is valued. Update, March 21st, 2025. Thanks to everyone who replied to my post and was so compassionate and kind. It was remarkable to hear from so many individuals who actively contend with chronic pain or illness, and those with loved ones who do. I hope to keep deepening my empathy for anyone struggling with an invisible illness. On to my update. Equipped with some new perspectives and some new frustrations, LOL, I spoke to my boyfriend and informed him that he must see a doctor, or I will no longer be able to back him financially, and simply watch while he stays unemployed and unmotivated to obtain the help he requires. I also brought up the concept of managing or balancing his energy levels differently so we could share household duties more efficiently, spend meaningful time together, and have him continue doing the things he enjoys with his friends. His response was really bad. He told me that if I'm not willing to step up and clean in the house, which I'm already doing, that there's no point in living together, and that my cleaning efforts are the bare minimum, and don't meet his standards regardless. He was also really mad that I hadn't taken the lead to handle yard projects and car repairs. He sat there and rattled off an entire list of things I wasn't noticing or cleaning, and once again he was preoccupied with this notion that I don't like his friends, or am jealous of them and desire him to spend less time with them, which is not true in the slightest. This truly hurt. He basically glossed over everything I said and concentrated on my perceived shortcomings. This revealed everything I needed to know, and I told him I was leaving. He was just angry, not sad or hurt at all. I'm still crying excessively over his entire reaction. I still don't know the reality or unreality of his chronic pain, but I suppose it no longer matters. Again, thank you to everyone for your support and kindness. I'm genuinely at a loss. Now, on to a story that will leave you speechless. My fiancé and I had been a couple for 3 years. He was my first boyfriend. We laughed, cried, worried, and found happiness together. Our families had blended really well. Our mothers became close friends very quickly. He was my best friend, my confidant, my support, my comfort. I looked at him and could envision our future together. God, I'm even tearing up remembering one time we took a blanket, went outside, and looked up at the stars like in some book. I never imagined something like this could happen to me. The man I loved could have never done anything like that to me. It all started about 2 months ago. His ex, his high school sweetheart of 7 years, moved back to our country and wanted to catch up with Mark. Fake name. He told me they broke up because they were unable to sustain LDR when she left to pursue postgraduate studies. They hadn't been in touch for about 5 years. She sent him an email, he showed it to me, and it was completely platonic. She was just curious about what he had become. He asked me if he could meet her, and I agreed. So he went, but when he returned, he was a bit withdrawn. He is usually very chatty, but he was dismissive when I asked him how it went, etc. I let it go. However, in the weeks that followed, he was often on his phone. He started random arguments with me and didn't look me in the eyes during sex, and didn't whisper loving words either. I'm very affectionate, even a bit clingy. And in our 3 years together, he had never once pulled away or rejected my embrace. But he began doing so. I usually hug him like a koala when he returns home from work. I'm a bit childish, I know, but he only allowed me to do it twice. The change was so sudden. I asked him what was wrong, but he just said he wasn't feeling well lately. On a Saturday, I went to visit his grandma, as we usually knit together. She taught me, and I was out for the entire day. I feel really close to her because she readily accepted me and reminds me of my own grandmother, who passed away when I was in high school. When I returned, I found him packing his belongings. My whole world fell apart. He was being so cowardly. He told me he was sorry for causing me such pain, but sometimes life gives you a second chance, and you have to acknowledge it for what it is. He said that he loved me, but when he met his ex, he realized his feelings for me weren't the same. He said he regretted letting her go, that he had found himself again, that it had been a difficult choice for him. But he had to seize this opportunity. His ex wanted him back. She had realized what she had lost and risked losing her permanently when he told her he was getting married. He supposedly initially turned her down, but as time went on and they continued talking, his former feelings resurfaced. He hoped I would forgive him one day and understand. I cried as he was talking. It might sound foolish, but it was as if a stranger stood before me. He said he would continue to pay rent and a portion of the bills until our lease ended and I could find another place. He earns significantly more than me, and I wouldn't be able to afford living in our apartment by myself. I pleaded with him not to make this error, telling him he was being deceived by an idealized memory of their past together, that he was getting cold feet. But he was like a wall. He didn't even look at me. Around 10 p.m., a truck was outside with one of his friends waiting for him. He apparently came to help him move. I wasn't very close with that specific friend, but he did seem to feel bad for me. Mark hugged me goodbye and left. I hadn't cried that intensely in years. I slept in our spare room so I wouldn't feel the emptiness of our room with his belongings gone. I sank into the deepest despair and tried to call him, but it went to voicemail. I had no idea where he went, but assumed he was now living with his ex after only 3 weeks of talking again. How absurd. I'm truly fortunate to have supportive friends and family. My best friend even moved in for 5 days. My parents wanted me back home with them, but I wasn't ready to leave. Mark is a bit messy, and I'm very particular, so it felt strange having everything perfectly neat. I missed his messiness. It was as if he was the one who made our house a home. He used to joke about me wanting the house to look like it was on sale or in a catalog, not waking up to make breakfast, not seeing him read lying on the sofa while I studied. Felt strange. not buying his favorite snack or protein powders when grocery shopping felt strange. I felt really lost at first. It was like grieving. Usually when people break up, their relationship was already declining, but for me, it came out of nowhere. I still loved him. I was still planning the wedding and working on my end to build our future together. It was all gone in a day. I wish I had been smarter and refused him meeting his one that got away. His family was dumbfounded. I still went to see his grandma, and she told me he was a fool and that he would come back, crawling to me. She was the first person who managed to make me laugh. His mom, my mom, and I started making calls to cancel all reservations. Fortunately, the store agreed to take back the dress. We didn't pay much for the venue since we canceled early. Next was informing the guests. He had been gone for about 3 weeks by then. His family was furious with him, so they didn't contact him much. The only contact I had with him was the signed check he sent to cover the wedding cancellation. However, about a week ago, I received a letter from him. He apologized for leaving me like that. He said he made the biggest mistake of his life, that he couldn't even believe what he had done, that he was writing me this letter because he didn't have the courage to face me. You were right. I was chasing a perfect relationship that had never existed. I regret it so much. I thought I was in love with her, but in reality, I was in love with what she represented. My younger self, with no responsibilities and only dreams. I had cold feet and became afraid of moving forward into this new phase of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about you when I was with her. She is not you. She doesn't know me or love me like you. She doesn't smell like you. I missed hearing you sing randomly throughout the day. I missed having someone nag me to pick up my things. I missed planning Halloween parties for the kids with you. At the time I'm writing this letter, we would have probably been decoration shopping had I not been a fool. Everyone told me, but I was being a blind fool. I would do anything to go back in the past and slap some sense into myself. I would do anything for you to forgive me. I know we have already started canceling everything, but I'm ready to pay for everything myself. You can date someone else to even the score if you want, as long as you come back to me. I would write the whole letter, but I'm on my iPad, and it's tiring. I just gave the important parts. He continued with apologies and begging me to forgive him. Now I've told my family, left friends out for the moment, and his mom and grandma. Grandma had a very satisfying told-you-so moment. However, she is rooting for me to forgive him. His mom was supposed to send a formal letter to guests to tell them the wedding was off, but now she's waiting for my answer. I don't know what to do. I love him with all my heart, but what he did to me, I don't know what to do. I love him with all my heart, but after what he did to me, I don't know if I can get past it. He made me feel worthless. He discarded me as if I were nothing to him after 3 years. He gave up on us for some ghost from his past when we were at our happiest. If he can leave me when we are doing well, how will we sustain a marriage? Will he leave the moment that things get difficult? He hurt me so badly and expects me to forgive him? He wants us to meet on Sunday, but I'm not sure I'm willing to. I need some perspective. What would you do in my situation? I didn't plan on updating, or at least not so soon, but I have another problem. I'm really thankful to everyone who answered and comforted me. You guys gave me the strength to look forward and not make a decision based on nostalgia. I felt truly alone in my pain, but thanks to you, I felt a little less lonely. So Mark wanted to meet on Sunday, but I unblocked him from my phone and told him I didn't want to meet and to please not contact me anymore. He answered, "Please, baby, I need to talk to you. Can we meet another day? I know I messed up really bad and hurt you deeply, but I'll do anything to make it up to you. Anything you ask, I'll do it." Needless to say, it just angered me more. How dare he use terms of endearment with me? I just blocked him again after that. I met his mom on Saturday and told her to proceed with the cancellation notice. We had a heartfelt moment, and she told me that even though she would have truly wished for us to remain one large family, she would have done the same in my position. She had hoped I would find the strength to forgive him, but she understands. and so the wedding is indeed still being canceled. My brother, bless his heart, I told him personally, had already purchased his plane tickets from Australia, but got a refund. I rearranged all the furniture in the house and bought new bedding to make a fresh start and move to the spare room permanently. It looks quite different, and I like it. Apparently, he told our friends because some mentioned it to me, asking if we were getting back together, but they said they didn't want to take sides. On Sunday evening, I received a visitor. I rarely have people come this late. It was around 9 p.m. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Mark with his ex. I seriously had a moment of panic. He must still have the key to the main entrance since he managed to reach my door without using the intercom. I don't know if it was a cowardly act, but I just chose not to open. I know they knew I was there, and I heard him ask me to please let him in, saying he just wanted to talk through the door. Honestly, even though I feel better, I don't believe I'm emotionally steady enough to deal with him, and especially him with his ex. They stayed for about 15 minutes, and then they left. I thought he would get the message, but they came again yesterday around the same time, and I didn't open again. They waited even longer. I know I'm not being an adult, so now I don't know what to do. I feel uneasy in my own house because I dread the moment they'll return. He knows my schedule, and he came at the time I usually return from my Zumba class. However, yesterday was a holiday, so we didn't have class. I'm afraid he will come again, and I don't think I can face him. What should I do? I know I can't run away forever, but I need more time. Is this worth calling the police about? I fear it would make the problem bigger than it is, and hurt our family relations. Our moms are really close, and really he is not dangerous, I think. He didn't contact me enough for it to be considered harassment anyway. Should I just be a big girl and open the next time he or they come? Or should I just wait it out? Also, why the hell is he bringing her? I'm curious, but I want to stick to my decision. Next story. My girlfriend started hanging out with a 40-year-old coworker behind my back. When I told her I was uncomfortable, she called me insecure and went to his house anyway, behind my back. When I said I was uncomfortable, she called me insecure and left for his house anyway. I'm male, 21, and my girlfriend is 20. We've been together since I was 16 and she 15, and we've been inseparable since then until now. We work at the same company and have done so for about 2 years now. We even work in the same section. Lately, she has been getting closer to our colleague, a 40-year-old male, and I haven't seen a problem with this since he's 40. But recently, they've wanted to hang out after work, separate from me and our other friends. Things they do are just going for a walk, run, or hikes, which normally take around 40 minutes to an hour, which is normal, I guess. But now my girlfriend wants to have a movie night at his house, and they're going to watch the latest Fast and Furious movie. I asked to join, but she said they needed to be alone because they were going to talk about friends stuff, claiming they were like best girlfriends. At first I thought, okay, that's fine, I guess, because again, he's 40. But now, after the fact, I'm starting to worry they're getting a little too close. Am I overreacting? Or is this something male and female friends normally do? I don't really have any experience with this, simply because I don't really have any close female friends other than my girlfriend. So please, I need some advice or just some outside perspectives on this. Edit. Based on the first few comments, I'd like to add some details. First, she is acting perfectly normal towards me. Loving, caring, and generally like the girl I fell in love with. Second, this may seem a bit arrogant, but if I may boast a little, I am 6'4", blonde, fit from attending the gym for 5 years, and I love cooking, traveling, and spending time with friends and family. He is 5'8", bald, not exactly fat, but more on the out-of-shape side, and is somewhat of a gamer, I suppose. I mean, computer games. So he only possesses a handful of friends, and likewise at work. I am not saying this to bully or belittle him in any way. It's simply plain facts. Third, my girlfriend said that after meeting some of his friends at a local gathering here, she said it felt strange being considerably younger than everyone at that specific table, so she just kept her greetings brief. Finally, if you consider all this, I couldn't see any reason why I should have been suspicious sooner. Update 1, March 28th, 2025. Thanks for all the comments and DMs. There is no way I can respond to all of them, so I will attempt to provide an update now, as I feel almost obligated to do so due to the significant response from the community. She actually went through with it. Earlier today, we sat down to talk about exactly how I felt regarding this entire situation, and that it's odd for her to go alone to his house, seeing as he's effing 40. I was very clear about my view on being excluded from this entire matter, and that it's strange for her to go alone to his house, as he's effing 40. I was very direct about how I felt about being excluded from this entire matter, and that it wasn't okay for me to feel like a third wheel in my own relationship. Her answer: I didn't expect you to be such an insecure man after 5 years together. Honestly, this kinda crushed me. How is it acceptable for her to simply dismiss my feelings with a comment like that? I must admit I'm absolutely not the best at expressing my feelings in this manner, and it feels very awkward for me to open up like that to someone, even if we've been together for years, and I can kinda see why when rat was her response. After that single small comment, it truly dawned on me that she actually doesn't care about me anymore. The rest of the conversation deteriorated from that point on. I began to accuse her of cheating. She started throwing an effing fit about how I dared accuse her of things like that, after 5 years together, questioning how I didn't trust her. After approximately 20 minutes of this, I was honestly devastated. So I simply walked out. I didn't say a word, just walked. I was gone for roughly 30 minutes, just to try and clear my head from this entire conversation. When I returned, she was waiting for me with a single question. Do you think I have cheated on you? I replied, yes, I really do. And then I believe I did something foolish. I showed her my initial post to convey my point even more clearly, that the things I'm feeling and thinking about are the general opinion in the comments. She was stunned and silent for a moment, and I think she actually kind of saw why I felt the way I did. Her response after that: I have to go. The 40-year-old is waiting to start the movie, and I think we should take a short break from each other. She fucking went to him. After our fight, what did it do? I went to my father at his job and actually cried in his arms for the first time in probably 15 years. And now I'm at home in bed and have talked to my landlord, and she is very understanding, and she said that I can remove my name from the lease anytime I want. Standing, and she said that I can remove my name from the lease anytime I want. What now? I'm in my bed feeling completely empty, numb, sick, furious. And to be honest, I went kind of off the hook when I came back from my dad. I threw some shit on the floor, actually cut the networking cable in the wall, as she maintains a blog that she is very passionate about. I won't link it, so don't even ask, as I don't want to give that POS more activity on it. This update probably went just the way people expected it to, so I hope people are happy. My relationship is likely 100% over to spare me in the future. But please, how can I come out on top in this? I have to see both on Monday when we get to work. I don't think I can handle this, so please, advice is more than welcome. I might do another update later on if I can mentally go through this again, as right now I literally can't handle it. I am mentally breaking down as I am writing this. Holy cow, Ada. Thank you for the overwhelming response to my little situation, if you can call it that. There's no way whatsoever that I'll be able to answer even a minority of the comments and DMs, so I'll do my best to update you guys, as I really do think I almost owe it to you after the incredible feedback. Well, where should I start? When I reflect on my personal reaction to this, it was truly childish of me to start breaking things and cutting wires as if I were throwing a tantrum, which I probably was. I've made arrangements to replace the items that were ours, and the items that were mine don't really matter. The internet cable will be repaired tomorrow. This has revealed a whole new side of me that I didn't know existed. But honestly, can you really blame me too harshly for this? This has been without a doubt the worst weekend in my life, and I was actually surprised that I didn't really see any comments calling me out on my unacceptable behavior. Now, regarding the rest of this, I left off when I was lying in bed and typing out what happened on Friday. The rest of that Friday, I did just that. I stayed in bed for the remainder of the night and couldn't sleep, as I was simply thinking about all our memories, and that we would never create new ones, as well as thinking far too much about what they were probably doing in another bed. The Saturday, I made a big mistake. I started to drink. That led me to go to a party, and honestly, I shouldn't have done that. Because I drunk called my now ex and asked one last time if it really was over for us. And indeed, she said yes. And this is why you should not drink after something like this, because unfortunately for me, one of her closer friends was at that party, and one thing led to another, and we ended up in bed together. And I did this solely to make my ex mad. You cannot fathom my regret on Sunday. I have never done anything of this nature before and will never do it again. And I told the friend as much and apologized profusely for using her for this. And she said it was okay and she understood. But you could see that it hurt her more than she said. And I feel like the biggest asshole in the world. And I can't even begin to imagine how she feels. And I truly deserve all the shit coming my way from you guys for this. After all that, I also felt as though I had cheated on my ex by doing this. I cannot explain why I simply did. Probably because I had sex with someone else the day after we ended a 5-year relationship. The rest of the Sunday I was brooding over what I had just done and utterly dreading that it was Monday tomorrow. And I'm actually feeling sick just thinking about going to work. Today, Monday, started in probably the worst way possible. My ex and our colleague arrived at work in the same car, and when I tell you it felt like that burning coal in my stomach transformed into an utterly all-consuming black hole, I can't describe it any better. But, being a man, I guess I just attempted to ignore it. I must not have been very convincing, because she came right over to me and said it wasn't what it looked like. He had actually just picked her up at our house. I had slept at my dad's house from Sunday to Monday. This didn't make me feel any better whatsoever, because how could I believe that? But I also apologized for my behavior from Friday, admitting I had acted childish and immature. She said it was okay and that it was understandable why I did what I did. Then, after that, the rest of the day got even worse, if you can believe it. Somehow, news of our breakup had already spread like wildfire at work, and to my delight, apparently it was almost an open secret that my ex and our colleague had hooked up at least once before at a business party. And that was it for me today. I called it. I went to my boss, told him I was sick, and went home. A couple of hours later, I'm just sitting here, trying to eat. It's not going so well. I'm just thinking about how my colleagues at work could keep such a secret from me. I can't even imagine continuing to work here anymore. So I'm also sitting and looking for new work as we speak. And as it stands right now, I've removed my name from the house lease and will start packing my belongings tomorrow to move out and temporarily move in with my father while I find a new place. Like with my last post, I truly appreciate some advice, and this time I will try to be more active regarding the comments and DMs. I am also weary of hearing, "You are young, you'll find someone new." My issue is I don't truly want anyone else. So, what do people think about my current situation, the definition of a shit show? I have received many messages that said I was incredibly childish about all my decisions, and I know I was. Simply calling me childish is one thing, but please at least offer some advice or something so I can at least view it as some form of helpful criticism. Time for another story you won't believe. This situation occurred in the summer, but it was brought up again recently, so I wanted some unbiased opinions to see if I crossed a line. There are 3 important points I want to share as background before I continue. 1. I, 30M, have my own business. I've also been very lucky that it's doing incredibly well, and I'm very grateful and blessed it's expanding. 2. My wife, 28F, works in a corporate job at a well-known company. This was also her first job right out of college, and she was recently promoted to director. She has people who report to her, and she reports directly to the senior director. 3. My wife and I purchased land and had a custom-built forever home, constructed in the summer of 2023. We were involved throughout the entire process, from designing the house to selecting all the furniture. The entire process, from the house's construction to it being fully furnished, took a little over a year. We're extremely proud of how it turned out. We enjoy hosting gatherings, so once the house was complete, we hosted many of them throughout the year. My wife wanted to host a barbecue and pool party in the summer and invited her coworkers. Since she was inviting a large number of them, around 50 I believe, we decided to cater food and provide outdoor activities, like a bouncy castle, as some would be bringing their families. Overall, a significant amount of planning and thought went into this, but my wife was happy to do it. A couple of days before the party, she provided some background on a few coworkers I had never met. She mentioned a person named Dick and explained he was her former boss, director of a different department, and always treated her poorly. My wife was advancing professionally quite rapidly, and he didn't seem to approve of it for some reason. She began her career in his department, but eventually became a director, reaching his level in terms of rank. I inquired why she was inviting such a person, and she said she didn't want him to feel excluded and further worsen their professional relationship. I suppose she hoped to try and resolve things outside of work hours to see if their dynamic might improve. Nevertheless, she asked me to be on my best behavior around him, even if he made any cutting comments, and she would manage it. I'm already quite protective of my wife because she's exceptionally kind and can sometimes be a punching bag for some people, but I promised her I would do my utmost. On the day of the party, everything was proceeding smoothly. Everyone was enjoying themselves by the pool with backyard games, a bouncy castle, and so on. Dick arrived about 30 minutes late, but I was the one who welcomed him at the door as my wife was occupied with the other guests. I introduced myself to him and guided him toward the guests. He was surprisingly pleasant to converse with while we were talking, but his entire attitude shifted the moment my wife approached. It was literally as if a switch had been flipped. I disregarded it, but my wife offered the late-arriving guests a tour of the house. As we were providing the tour, he continually made negative remarks about each room we paused in. For instance, when we presented the living room, he commented that the ceilings were too high. Why did you guys do that? Kinda pointless to have. In another instance, when we came to the guest pool house in the backyard, he asked, "Why did you guys build a guest house? Your house is big enough. It's like you want to show off." He continued making remarks of that nature, which caused the other guests to feel very uneasy. I just remained silent, as my wife had asked, and she would simply give an awkward laugh and keep the tour progressing. Once the tour concluded, we guided them to the backyard where everyone else was gathered. Everyone but Dick remained, and he began speaking with us. He was posing questions such as, how much was the house? Who paid for most of it? Quite intrusive inquiries, in my opinion. I told him that's information I prefer not to disclose, and we then shifted the topic. A short while later, as we were eating and conversing with other guests, the topic of the house came up. Someone commented they admired the backyard layout and inquired who had designed it for us. My wife responded by saying that we had designed it all ourselves. As she was speaking, Dick interrupted to say in a highly sarcastic tone, "Whoa, whoa, be careful not to ask them how much it was. Apparently it's private information that only the elite share with each other." There was an awkward silence. I had honestly reached my limit because at this point, he was simply trying to humiliate her without cause. I replied, "Is there a problem here? Ever since you arrived, you've been rude." He merely scoffed and stated it was simply something he wished to know, then remained silent. I pressed him and asked why he would need to know. He didn't respond and simply stared. I told him, "Next time when people are speaking, you don't need to insert yourself." Upon my saying that, he then launched into a rant. I don't know who you think you're speaking to like that, but I found it strange and wanted to know how my wife could afford this house on her salary. There's no way she earns enough for this house. Let me guess, You covered most of the cost." I interrupted him mid-rant and stated, "I can speak to you however I wish. I don't work for you, and neither does my wife. This is also my wife's and my house, and you don't get to disrespect us here. I don't know what issues you have with my wife, but it stops here." At this point, and I'm not proud of this, I started getting into his face and went on to say, "Just because you're envious of my wife and how she's advanced in her career while you've remained in the same position for however long doesn't give you the right to be an asshole. You can get the hell off my property before I have to physically remove you." He appeared dumbfounded because I suppose he hadn't expected me to get that close. He replied by saying something to the effect that my wife had slept her way to her position and had slept her way into an easy life where she didn't have to pay for anything, and that we were just flaunting our money in people's faces. That was my breaking point, so I grabbed him by his collar and began dragging and pushing him out of the house. When I returned, my wife's close co-workers were consoling her, and the others decided it was time to leave. Once everyone had eventually left, my wife told me I didn't need to defend her like that. She's quite capable of handling things on her own. She stated that due to my outburst, everything would now be awkward for her at work. I told her I know I shouldn't have acted that way, but he was overstepping his bounds. There's a limit to what I could tolerate. In summary, she's upset that I didn't heed the one request she had for me, that I permitted one individual to the one request she had for me, that I permitted one individual to spoil the party, and she's concerned there will be problems at work. Furthermore, she's concerned I might be arrested for assault. I told her there's no need to worry because she did nothing wrong. She simply stood up and walked away, stating that I don't understand corporate culture. So, Ida in this situation. Update, February 19th, 2025. Uncertain about how to update properly, so I left a comment and created a new post as well. Apologies if that's excessive. Also, apologies for the rambling in my post, LOL. I reread my post and agree with you guys, I did add some useless info. I'm a better speaker than writer, LOL. Also, my wife and I read all the comments, and we actually enjoyed reading them. Even though some were kind of mean, she came to the realization that she needed to be more assertive and not be spineless, as some people so generously called her. As I mentioned before, this happened in the summer. The day after everything happened, we both apologized to each other, and I asked her to give me a full rundown of Dick from when she used to be in his department, because there's no way someone has that much hatred for someone without reason. So we did try to make advances on her when she first joined, but not only her, but a bunch of other female co-workers, some of whom were at the party. She shot him down multiple times and went to HR with her co-workers to file complaints, and Dick's behavior did stop. However, he was now having her manager give her a ton of work to do. She was working long hours, but it ended up working in her favor because the other department's manager noticed her workload and her ability to finish it without mistakes, and pretty much poached her to join her team. So from then until she got promoted to director, she had very few interactions with him. It's only when she got promoted to director that she was forced to interact. My wife, Dick, and the senior director, Tim, would have meetings every morning. She said he never really behaved poorly toward her, but he would always minimize any ideas she presented or completely disregard them. She thought if she invited him to the party, perhaps that would alter his conduct and bury the hatchet. She realizes that it was quite foolish to presume that would occur. My wife did tell me that when she encountered everyone at work, they told her not to worry, and many of them were pleased someone at last took action against him. Some were wishing for more, but content nonetheless. She said that improved her mood because she thought they would view her negatively, which I'm not sure why, but my wife tends to overthink things. She filed a complaint with HR for harassment against Dick, and he did likewise, but targeting me. HR took no action for either party. She received an email stating that since this occurred off company premises and was not a company-sponsored event, no corporate action was required, and any disputes that arise must be resolved by the individuals involved. She was concerned that Dick might sue or contact the police, but a month passed with no developments, so we presumed he had simply abandoned the matter. During meetings, Dick would simply remain quiet after my wife spoke, instead of making condescending remarks, as he usually did. I hadn't seen or talked to Dick since that party, but my wife invited me to attend the company Christmas party, where I did see Dick, though he ignored us. I encountered Tim, and when my wife introduced me, he said something to the effect of, "Thanks for coming. Please don't drag me across the room. I'm very nice to your wife." My wife and I erupted in laughter, and I understood that Dick had become the butt of the jokes. Evidently, people at work began making a collar-grabbing motion behind Dick's back. The reason it was mentioned again recently was because my wife informed me a few days prior that he put his 2 weeks in. I joked we should throw a party, but she felt bad because she believes he quit because of her. I told her that she had done nothing amiss, and whatever transpired with Dick after the party was on him. Nothing would have happened if he had simply kept his mouth shut. She comprehends, but she still feels bad. My wife is a highly empathetic person, even to those who are undeserving. So it may not be the ending some of you had been anticipating, but it worked out for us. We still make light of being dragged across the room occasionally, but all in all, everything concluded in the most favorable manner for us. Next story, I discovered my wife's male best friend was actually her secret ex-FWB. So I kicked her out, obtained DNA tests for our kids, and filed for divorce. Now, it turns out my sister already knew the truth. 1 month ago, I, 43M, discovered that my wife's, 41F, male best friend, 40M, was actually her former FWB, and that has angered me immensely. Not simply because they shared that kind of history, but because she kept it hidden from me for all these years. To make matters worse, my sister, 40F, who is also my wife's best friend, was aware of it and never told me. When we began dating 18 years ago, we agreed to end all contact with our exes. I've now realized that she's been deceiving me about that for years. After discovering this last month, I spoke with a lawyer and told my wife we were getting a divorce. Nothing she says or does now will change that. I also arranged a DNA test for my daughter, 16F, and twin boys, 12M, and have cut off all contact with my sister. Some might argue I'm going too far, especially with the DNA test, but there's a reason for it. Her FWB and I appear remarkably similar. We're both 6 feet tall, have blonde hair and blue eyes. Until now, I never questioned if my children were mine, but after learning about her past with him, I can't help but feel paranoid. On top of that, her FWB never married because he claimed to have a free spirit. It makes me feel as though she simply settled for me. And if he had ever decided he wanted marriage, she would have abandoned me instantly. The sole positive aspect in all of this is that the house we live in is in my name. I inherited it from my grandpa before we got married. At present, I've had my wife leave the house and taken her to her parents' place, where I informed them exactly why we're getting divorced. I also informed my children because I feel they are mature enough to learn the truth. Since then, my wife has been phoning me constantly, weeping and vowing that they were merely friends, but I don't believe her. I stated unequivocally that even if the DNA test verifies all 3 children are mine, I will still proceed with the divorce. According to what I've heard from my brother-in-law, who resides close to her parents, she's a total wreck and hardly eats anything. My sister has also attempted to contact me through her husband, but I told them I no longer consider her my sister after squandering 18 years of my life. Truthfully, if the DNA test returns negative, I don't know what I would do. I cherish my children above all else in this world, and discovering that even one of them is not mine would devastate me more than anything else. Update 1, March 26, 2025. First, I want to clarify some points. I didn't simply force her out of the house like some crazy person. I requested space, and she agreed. I then drove her to her parents' place, which is just over an hour away by car. The concept of severing ties with ex-partners was hers. When she mentioned exes, she referred to individuals such as my childhood friend, whom I only went out with for a month in high school, yet inexplicably not her FWB, with whom she had a sexual relationship for an unknown duration. Yes, cutting him off would have probably cost her half of her friend group. But the same thing happened to me when I cut ties with my childhood friend because of her boundaries. If she didn't want to lose friends over this, she shouldn't have been the one to suggest cutting ties with exes then. I explained the reason for our separation to our children. She lied about something important, and I was upset. I told them that I wanted us to take some time apart for now. The house isn't about money, it's about the sentimental value. It holds memories of my grandparents and childhood, and it's where I've made so many memories with my kids. That's why I consulted with a lawyer about the house first. I would still need to pay at least $100,000 to my wife for the house, but I'm okay with that. I asked her about her relationship with that guy 2 or 3 times early in our relationship. She always assured me that they were just friends, but I felt insecure and asked my sister, who knew them for 4 or 5 years. She told me their relationship was like that of a brother and sister, so I chose to believe her. Big mistake. The FWB was never someone who would settle down and have a family. For as long as I've known him, he's always been traveling, doing dangerous things, and chasing thrills. That's why I feel like I was the safe choice for her. The fact that she kept their relationship a secret from me for 18 years only makes me think I'm right. The results of the DNA test do not matter. They will always be my children. Even if the results return positive, I still intend to proceed with the divorce. However, I should at least try 3 to 6 months of couples therapy. If not for myself, then at least for the kids. Regarding the test results, I'll wait for my best friend before reviewing them so I have someone for support. I'll post a brief update in the comments once I look at them. Edit. As some people have advised, I should probably have her take a polygraph test to see if she's lying, and I will do that. Small update. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to begin this, but my kids are mine by blood and soul. I can't even begin to describe the mix of happiness, sadness, and guilt I feel right now. But I wanted to give you all an update since you've helped keep my mind occupied and not let my thoughts spiral down into a dark place. So thank you all. So, about an hour and a half ago, my best friend, who I've known for as long as I can remember, drove nearly 3 hours to be with me and help me through this. After he arrived, we had a beer or two, and I told him everything. He just listened, letting me get it all out, and reassured me that he'd be there for me, no matter what. After about 10 minutes, I finally gathered the courage to look at the test results and completely broke down. I collapsed into a crying mess. When I finally calmed down, we started talking about what I should do next. Should I try to save my marriage for the sake of the kids? Would that even be the right thing to do? That's when my friend shared an experience from his own past. When he was young, one of his parents was unfaithful, but they still stayed together for the kids, and he told me, without hesitation, that it was the worst thing they could have done. He spent years wishing they had simply divorced, instead of forcing everyone to live in that kind of broken relationship. His words, along with some of the private messages I've received, really affected me, so I've decided not to try to save the marriage. I will proceed with the divorce, but I also want to ensure that even after it's over, we can still work together for the best interests of our children. That's why I'll be attending both individual and couples therapy, so that we can learn how to co-parent in the healthiest way possible. I am also looking for a good therapist for my 3 children so that they can begin to heal as soon as possible. Comments where OP has replied. Commenter 1. Wow, your sister lied to you to protect your wife's cheating? That's cold. Does your sister hate you or something? OP. I always thought our sibling relationship was good. I even walked her down the aisle. Commenter 2. Did she try to argue that he didn't count as an ex even though she had sex with him? She'll probably argue that she isn't the same person now as she was back then, but you need to figure out what kind of person she was at that time and if you would have dated and married her had you known. If not, then her lies were essentially about deceiving you into a relationship with her, which shows little respect for you. Oop, she said something along those lines, that she didn't want to lose a friend group because of this, and that it was just meaningless sex they had a few times. She also claimed she hadn't met him alone since we made it official. If she hadn't made us cut off all our exes, I would have understood her not wanting to ruin a friend group. But she was fine with destroying my friend group with her boundaries, just not her own. Update 2, March 31st, 2025. Hello, friends. I wanted to post one final update on what's been happening after I talked with my wife when she got back from her parents. As you can see from the title, I've decided to give her a second chance after checking her current phone and her old phone from around 12 years back. We spoke at length, and I asked her why she insisted I cut ties with my exes while she maintained contact with her past FWB. It emerged that her first long-term boyfriend of 3 years had betrayed her with a mutual friend, which caused her profound insecurity about her subsequent partners having female friends, especially exes. From when we began dating until I formalized our relationship after around 5 or 6 months, she was grappling with those insecurities. When I asked her to formalize our relationship and become engaged, she chatted with my sister, who proposed we both sever ties with our exes. My wife agreed, but my sister persuaded her that the FWB wasn't considered an ex, because they had only been intimate twice during a trip to Europe with some friends. Later, my wife felt bad about deceiving me and wished to disclose her history with him, but my sister prevented her. She told my wife that mentioning it would just create needless stress and could even jeopardize her pregnancy. Consequently, my wife opted not to inform me, but attempted to keep her distance from him instead. Eventually, she intended to sever all ties with him without my ever finding out. However, my sister harbored different intentions. She was smitten with the FWB's close friend, and was very fond of that friend group. She knew that if my wife pulled away, it would unavoidably break up the group, so she pushed my wife to go to meetups where the FWB would be, sometimes deceiving her about who would attend. Another possible reason my sister did this was that she herself wished to continue seeing her own FWB while in a relationship and wanted to avoid feeling guilty. That's the sole explanation I can conceive. I also inquired if my wife would undergo a polygraph test to demonstrate she had never been unfaithful to me, and she consented instantly without a moment's pause. So we're planning to attempt to salvage this marriage, beginning with marriage counseling and other steps to restore confidence. But first, she has to entirely sever ties with that friend group and block my sister from all contact. And to respond to some private messages I've received, no, I'm neither an abuser, nor have I financially mistreated my wife. She has been employed since our twin sons reached age 2, and my mother came to live with us to assist in their care while we both worked. And no, I'm not simply seeking a pretext to end this marriage due to some midlife crisis. I love my wife and my children, and being apart from them for weeks or months would be devastating. Let's move on to the next story. This is a bit of an emergency, so I'll get straight to it. So, I, a 40-year-old male, had been married to my soon-to-be ex-wife, Megan, 38, for almost 12 years. We also have a 14-year-old son, Johnny, or at least I believed he was my son for all these years. Megan and I met at work and had only been dating for a year when she found out she was pregnant. I was somewhat skeptical about having a baby so early in our relationship, but she wanted to continue the pregnancy, so I decided to support her, and we moved in together after learning about it. When Johnny was born, it didn't even occur to me to get a paternity test because Megan and I were in love. And by then, I was more than certain Johnny was my son. I felt very connected to him, and he even resembled me because we both had dark hair and eyes, so I literally had no reason to be suspicious of anything. However, a few months ago, I discovered he's actually not my biological son, and Megan had been playing me for a fool all along. About 3 months ago, she came clean to son, and Megan had been playing me for a fool all along. About 3 months ago, she confessed to me that she'd been having an affair with her high school sweetheart, Nathan, for the past few months. And even at the start of our relationship, she'd had a bit of a fling with him while we were together, and she'd never told me about it. Because after she became pregnant, a primary reason she and Nathan had to part ways after high school was that he wasn't very serious about his life and had opted not to attend college. At that time, he was still living with his parents and was moving from one job to another every few months. She believed she needed stability in her life, which is why she chose to be with me, as I was very career-driven, and she said that if she decided to stay with me, she would be betting on the right horse. But now she had realized that money wasn't everything, and she said that if she decided to stay with me, she would be betting on the right horse. But now she had realized that money wasn't everything, and she was in love with Nathan, so she desired to build a life with him. Moreover, he had had ample time to change his ways, and he was now a business owner himself, so she no longer had to worry about finances. When she confessed to me, she revealed that she had had a paternity test done and knew Johnny wasn't my son from the very start, but had chosen to remain silent about it because I appeared very happy to be a father, and she didn't want to jeopardize our relationship by discussing her past. She also made Nathan promise never to mention this affair they had ever again, as she didn't want to risk our relationship, and for her happiness' sake, he had kept his distance. However, they had reconnected at a high school reunion nearly 6 months before she eventually told me the truth, and they had rekindled their relationship once more because he was well settled, and he was still in love with her, and she had realized that she was still in love with him as well, so she had to leave. It was a dreadful time for me because I had been with this woman for such a long time. I had built a life with her, and yet I was getting screwed over as if it meant nothing to her. In any case, after she told me the truth, she moved out of the house with all her belongings, but Johnny continued to stay with me because he didn't want to go with her. She hadn't even discussed it with me before revealing the truth to him, and he already knew everything before I had even gotten home from work. So both of us ended up comforting each other as we cried, since our lives had been completely turned upside down. I knew that regardless of the divorce proceedings, I would ensure we had shared custody of Johnny, because regardless of his biological parentage, he was my son through and through. I had raised him, and no one could ever take that from me, neither Nathan nor even Megan. I spoke to my lawyer and filed for a divorce within hours of learning the truth, and the terms of my divorce filing were quite straightforward and fair. I would keep everything we owned, and she shouldn't expect any alimony because she had been a stay-at-home mom for the past 14 years since she quit her job after Johnny was born, and despite all my support, she had cheated on me. She had already been using me for financial gain throughout all the years we had been together. I wasn't going to permit that any longer. Naturally, she disagreed with that and disputed the divorce terms, demanding alimony and a substantial settlement amount. I was prepared to fight for it. I didn't care. But she worsened matters by filing for full custody 3 weeks ago, seemingly because she and Nathan were planning to move to another city to open a branch of his business there, and they wanted to take Johnny with them. I would be granted visitation rights, but she demanded full custody now that things had finally worked out, so she could play happy family with Nathan simply because it was convenient for her. There was no way I was going to let that happen, and since we couldn't resolve this through mediation, the matter ended up in family court. I was quite confident that this would be a cakewalk for me, but she and Nathan started lying through their teeth about what kind of person I was, and I had to work really hard to prove them wrong, which is what has been complicating everything. Even though Johnny himself stated that he would like to stay here with me since he has grown up here, They are doing everything in their power to make it appear that Johnny is misguided and that I'm the one manipulating him. And they think that I'm too much of a workaholic to care for him by myself, and he would be better off residing with his mother. There's also the fact that I'm not his biological parent, which is why everything is taking double the time to resolve. Ever since the divorce proceedings started and Megan moved out, we had come to an informal agreement on how we would share our time with Johnny. Up until then, we had an arrangement where he would spend the initial 4 days of the week with Nathan and Megan and would return to me for the weekend. I thought that this was the arrangement that we would adhere to even after the divorce, but they made everything much more complicated than necessary by deciding to relocate to another city and unexpectedly filing for full custody. So we have been engaged in a custody dispute for the past couple of weeks. But when we were in family court recently, Johnny said something that sent everyone into a frenzy. This was the first time he had been actively involved in the court proceedings, and at one point he stated that he had wanted to stay here with me and was still going to stick to that. But not merely because his life was based here, but also because he had overheard Megan and Nathan speaking on the phone to their lawyer the night before. And he had overheard them discussing how they were going to portray me as the bad guy, and had come up with a set of lies that he began mentioning, which were far worse than the ones they had presented earlier. Before this, they had only been claiming that I was too much of a workaholic and lacked sufficient time for Johnny, that I would bring work home with me, and that most of my time at home I would simply remain confined to my room and would constantly be busy with work conferences even on weekends. They had also asserted that I rarely cared about Johnny's school performance and hadn't attended a single parent-teacher conference since his birth, delegating it all to my wife because I found it boring and never took an interest in his life. These claims were easy to refute, but apparently Johnny had heard that they intended to escalate their claims and truly make it appear as though I was mistreating him by asserting that I would physically assault him and yell at him for the slightest errors. But apparently Johnny was too afraid to talk about that in court before me, and then perhaps they would be able to get protective custody of him for the moment and eventually turn him against me, which would simplify their task. So he wanted to get ahead of them and clarify for himself that he had never been mistreated by me, and if anything, it was Megan and Nathan who were mistreating him by dragging him into this disorderly custody dispute and using him as a pawn just to retaliate against me for my divorce petition, which would leave Megan with nothing at all. Even though my filing was just since she had never made any money independently and had even dared to cheat on me despite being highly dependent on me, she thought that she merited the alimony and the settlement she was requesting and was intending to use Johnny's custody as bargaining power against me so we could reach a divorce settlement. And on the phone, he had overheard her saying that once they had the money from the divorce, she would invest in Nathan's business and propel it to new heights, and they had been virtually exulting with joy while discussing this. So sound level was likely the last thing on their minds. Unfortunately, they had failed to consider the fact that at that moment, Johnny was staying with them and hadn't returned to me yet, so they had been quite loud, and he had been standing just outside the door and had heard everything. After Johnny revealed Megan and Nathan, no one knew what to do, so the meeting had to be adjourned because our lawyers became a bit too loud, and we ended up needing to leave early. I felt quite pleased because after Johnny had spoken, I turned to look at Megan, and she literally had her head in her hands, gripping her hair with such might that I thought she would rip it out, which simply confirmed all of this was true, and she was ruined. I was content with how the situation had unfolded, and instead of returning home with Megan, Johnny chose to walk up to me, and we began to go home together. But Megan was enraged, so she halted us just as we were about to get into our car, seized Johnny by the arm, and began shaking him, while demanding an explanation as to why he would do such a thing in court and ruin his chances of living with her and Nathan. When I saw her shaking him, I lost my temper, so I went up to her, stood between them, and pushed her back so she wouldn't be able to lay a finger on him. Fortunately, my lawyer captured all of that on camera, and we will certainly be using that in our next session. But anyway, I told her to back off and said it was her own fault for being a disgusting human being, and I was glad that Johnny had taken a stand for me, because he was not a spineless, spoiled, greedy monster like her. I was already quite annoyed by how she was treating Johnny, especially after what I had discovered in court. I was not willing to let this continue, but then Nathan came to her aid and started shouting at us both about how she had done so much for our family, and now we couldn't even let her have a genuine chance at happiness with him. I had no interest in speaking to that guy, so I just rolled my eyes and began getting back into the car again. But then Megan kept holding onto Johnny's arm and stated she wouldn't permit him to come back home with me, because I was the one manipulating him against his own mother, and she was not going to allow this to happen. She told me that up until now she had only been seeking full custody so she could bring Johnny with her and Nathan when they relocated, but now she was going to ensure I wouldn't even receive visitation rights. These were audacious words from someone who had just been unmasked as a liar and who had been intending to deceive in court so she could acquire money she didn't merit. Anyway, I told her to release Johnny or I would contact the police, and she said that she was his mother and she had the right to decide where he would go. Even Johnny continued to try and free himself, but she was clinging to him very firmly and persisted in asserting she wouldn't allow him to return home with me. At one point, things became a bit heated, and Johnny is quite stocky and well-built, even though he's only 14. Megan, conversely, is petite and not very strong, so Johnny did the only thing he could. He pushed her quite hard to free himself, get into the car, and shut the door. But after she had been shoved, she began screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was encouraging her son to attack her, and she was not going to let this go. I thought that was an unfair thing to say because he had not attacked her. He had merely tried to free himself. In the process, she might have been nudged a little. She would have fallen, but Nathan was right there to catch her. So no harm done, correct? Well, apparently not, because she and Nathan continued to stand in front of our car and stated that she was going to ensure I lost custody of him, because if I was encouraging him to be violent towards others just because things weren't going my way, then I was definitely not fit to be a parent. It wasn't until I honked for so long that the horn ran out that they finally moved out of the way and allowed us to get back home. It has been a couple of days since then, and I'm still wondering if it was the correct thing for me not to reprimand Johnny for pushing his mother. He seems blissfully unaware, but I'm in a dilemma right now because that day he had definitely shoved Megan really hard, and he's very strong, so I don't want him repeating this kind of behavior with anybody else. But under those circumstances, I feel like he was justified in doing what he did. Anyway, I'm just confused about whether Megan had a point or not, because Johnny has kinda had problems with violence in the past. So, Ida for not telling my son off for pushing his mother away from him. Update 1. Hey, so a couple of you asked me why I said that Johnny has had issues with violence in the past. So that's because a couple of months ago he was having problems with bullying in school, and he hadn't told us about it. But one day we just received a phone call from the principal's office saying that Johnny had gotten into a fight, and he had been injured, but the guy that he had punched in the face was even more badly injured. Apparently, that guy had been bullying Johnny for several weeks, and he had ignored it initially. But then the guy started taking it too far and started cursing at our family, and Johnny didn't like that. He told the other guy to cut it out a couple of times, but when he still didn't, and even tried to vandalize his locker with curse words, he just snapped and punched the guy. So there was a whole fight in the hallway. Clearly, I informed Johnny that violence was never the solution to anything because I didn't want him engaging in fights and getting into trouble, but I was somewhat proud of him for defending himself. I suppose Johnny has never truly been violent unless the situation demands it, and I believe that's a positive aspect. Even in this scenario with his mother, he was merely attempting to free himself. He wasn't genuinely trying to harm anyone. Therefore, Megan misunderstood the situation and is attempting to use that against us, but I'm not going to question myself. A week has passed since the incident, and tomorrow we are scheduled to meet again. Initially, we're going to meet with our attorneys so we can reach a divorce settlement, and then we are meeting in court concerning Johnny's custody. Following the disclosure during our session, I strongly doubt they have any chance, so tomorrow could be the day we can finally close this chapter and arrive at a decision about what to do. Nonetheless, my attorney and I have gathered all the evidence I could collect, demonstrating that I'm actually a good father, and we're anticipating winning this case. And more crucially, Johnny's words will matter the most, and he has stated very clearly that he does not wish to live with his mother. And it's not solely because he wants to reside here and doesn't want to move, but because she is simply a truly awful person, and so is Nathan, and they will never be capable of raising him properly, and we certainly don't need another person like them. I was speaking with Johnny a few hours ago, and he mentioned that he was quite anxious because this will be the first time he sees his mother after pushing her away from himself, and he understood that she was very displeased about it. He admitted to me that he was striving very hard not to care about what she thinks, but ultimately she is his biological mother, and we have spent so many years together as a family that it's difficult to reconcile with the truth now. He mentioned to me that he was truly afraid of what would occur if by some chance he ended up being handed over to Megan and Nathan, but I assured him that it was not going to happen. I would go to any court in the world to ensure that it didn't happen so he could be with me, because he was my son. Nobody cares about some foolish paternity test. If I say he's my son, then he's my son. That seemed to make him feel somewhat better, but I can tell that the entire situation has been affecting him. I don't even know how I'm going to handle the situation if ultimately I do end up with custody of him. How do we recover from that? Because eventually his mother is going to depart the city and relocate with Nathan. I'm quite certain that after everything that has transpired, she won't be willing to see Johnny again if she doesn't gain custody of him. She's simply that type of person, and I don't want him to lose his relationship with his mother because I don't want him to resent me in the future. In any case, we are departing, and perhaps tomorrow might not be the final day of this case, but for my sake and Johnny's sake, we are hoping that it truly is. Update 2. Hello. So something quite strange just occurred. It's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning now, and I was sleeping, but then almost an hour ago someone rang the doorbell, and when I went to answer it, I saw there was no one outside, but only a brown envelope left at the door. I even reviewed the security footage, but whoever placed it outside was dressed entirely in black and had a hood drawn over their head, so I couldn't identify them. However, that individual was taller than 5 feet 3 inches, so it couldn't have been Megan, and they were either somewhat on the heavier side or the hoodie they were wearing was very bulky. Regardless, I don't believe it was Nathan either, and these two individuals are the only potential options since what was inside the brown envelope is what astonished me. Within, there were results of a paternity test, and surprisingly, they were positive. The results originated from the same lab where we underwent testing a couple of months prior, when Megan told me that Johnny was not biologically my son, and she had presented me with the results that indicated Johnny and I were not a match. I had the test done 3 times, just to confirm she was telling the truth, and all 3 times the results had been the same, and that's when I was finally convinced of the truth. But the results I just got indicate that Johnny and I are actually a match, so I'm very confused at the moment. I don't know which results were fake and which are real. To be honest, I found it very difficult to believe Johnny wasn't my son because we look so similar and I had never felt like he wasn't my son. So whoever sent me these test results is trying to mess with my head a day before we meet to decide on custody, or maybe there's something that I've been missing all along. Maybe Megan and Nathan pulled off paternity fraud or something. I called the laboratory just now, but clearly they didn't answer because, well, they're probably not even open yet. However, the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is go to check out the place, because this is really confusing, and I have no idea what to do right now. I have, however, spoken to my lawyer about this, and we're going to figure out something tomorrow. First, we just need to ensure these results are real, so I'm going to get tested again, but this time I'm not going to tell Megan anything about it. I don't know why, but I just have a strong feeling that I'm definitely going to get some answers tomorrow if I confront her with these results. Update 3. Hello everyone. So today was a very long day. First, I went to the laboratory with Johnny and my lawyer to ask about the results I'd received just last night. But before I could ask anyone about it, the man who seemed to be in charge took us aside and told us it was him. He had given me the envelope last night, but he hadn't actually expected me to show up. He explained to us that when we first got tested, Megan and Nathan had already spoken to him after they'd done some digging and found out which laboratory the court worked with, and they had an arrangement that he would change the results and show them as negative, so she could claim Johnny wasn't my son and tried to take him with her. Apparently, she had simply assumed that once I found out Johnny wasn't my biological son, I would give up on trying to be his father and leave them alone. However, when that didn't happen, after I received the initial test results and I returned for 2 more tests, she decided to tell this man to help her out and fake the results twice more. All this was done behind our backs, and she had promised him she would eventually make him a partner in the business once she got the money from our settlement, and he was looking forward to that, which is why he had helped her out 2 more times and had the paternity test results falsified all 3 times. I was stunned when I learned this because I had truly never imagined she was capable of such a thing. Anyway, he had had a change of heart recently because he had stayed in contact with Megan the whole time, and he had heard what occurred at family court, our last meeting, since she had to tell him that things were taking longer than she had anticipated, and they wouldn't be able to launch their business for a few more months, so he would have to wait. He had concluded he couldn't continue with her then because she was clearly very immoral and unethical, and so he chose to slip me that document last night. He apologized for all the trouble he had caused and practically begged me not to involve him in any of this, because he truly wanted to remain anonymous. And I was somewhat upset because this man who didn't even know me had screwed me over a few months back just for money, and I really wanted to turn him in. But that would just mean extra effort for me, and I didn't have the energy to do that. Perhaps if he repeats this sort of behavior, someone else will, but until then, I'm out. Besides, I already had the documents I needed to prove my paternity, so it didn't matter to me what happened to him. If it came down to it and I had to prove something in court, I would certainly use that as evidence and turn him in. However, for now, I had a different plan in mind. So then I went to court. But before we could sit down for our scheduled meeting to reach a divorce settlement, I took Megan aside, and she was rather surprised by that action. I told her that I had received this document last night, and they were the true results of the paternity test. So she immediately understood that I knew about the fraud she had committed. She initially tried to act innocent, but I told her that paternity fraud is a serious matter, and I was going to give her one opportunity to avoid further trouble if she agreed to my petition's terms this time, and also signed away her parental rights over Johnny. She agreed to the first part, but she wasn't agreeable to the second part and tried to negotiate with me, saying that she was his mother and couldn't just let him go. However, I wasn't buying any of that, and I told her that no mother in the world would do something like this to her own son, so now she could do what I asked of her, or I would create a lot of trouble for her. After arguing with me for nearly 10 minutes, she finally agreed, and I felt like I had won. After that, I finally managed to reach a settlement, and my lawyer and I were thrilled because she had agreed to the petition's terms. And after that, we only had to wait for our final confrontation in family court, and there too things unfolded exactly as planned, and she was displeased about it, but she consented to terminate her parental rights over Johnny and depart. That surprised everyone since she had been fighting fiercely for his custody for the past couple of weeks, and now suddenly she had capitulated. So that seemed somewhat odd, but I didn't mind. I had won Johnny. My lawyer and I finally went our separate ways and headed to our respective homes a couple of hours ago. And in a couple of days, my lawyer will have drafted the papers, and she will finally have signed away her rights. And then it's just going to be me and my son against the world. Even though I think it's sort of been like that for the past couple of months already, but I just can't wait for all of this to be officially over, and then I can finally try and move on with my life, because this has all been quite intense. However, as of now, Johnny is extremely happy with the situation, and so am I, so we're just trying to make the most of it. The final story for today. This is a bit of an emergency, so I'll get right to it. So I, a 40-year-old male, had been married to my soon-to-be ex-wife, Megan, 38, for nearly 12 years. We also have a 14-year-old son, Johnny, or at least I thought he was my son for all this time. Megan and I met at work and had only been dating for a year when she learned she was pregnant. I was somewhat hesitant about having a baby so early in our relationship, but she wanted to continue the pregnancy, so I decided to support her, and we moved in together after finding out. When Johnny was born, it didn't even cross my mind to get a paternity test because Megan and I were in love, and by then I was entirely sure Johnny was my son. I felt a strong bond with him, and he even looked like me because we both had dark hair and eyes, so I truly had no reason to be suspicious of anything. However, a few months ago I found out he's actually not my biological son, and Megan had been deceiving me all along. Roughly 3 months ago, she admitted the truth to Son, and Megan had been deceiving me all along. Roughly 3 months ago, she revealed to me that she'd been involved in an affair with her high school sweetheart, Nathan. For the past few months, and even at the beginning of our relationship, she'd had a brief fling with him while we were together, and she'd never informed me about it, because after she became pregnant, a main reason she and Nathan had to separate after high school was that he wasn't very serious about his life and had chosen not to attend college. At that time, he was still living with his parents and was switching from one job to another every few months. She felt she needed stability in her life, which is why she opted to be with me since I was very career-driven. And she said that if she decided to stay with me, she would be betting on the right horse. But now she had come to realize that money wasn't everything, and she said that if she decided to stay with me, she would be betting on the right horse. But now she had come to realize that money wasn't everything, and she was in love with Nathan, so she wished to build a life with him. Furthermore, he had had plenty of time to change his ways, and he was now a business owner himself, so she no longer had to worry about finances. When she admitted to me, she disclosed that she'd had a paternity test performed and knew Johnny wasn't my son from the very start, but had chosen to remain silent about it because I seemed very happy to be a father, and she didn't want to jeopardize our relationship by discussing her past. She also made Nathan promise never to mention this affair they had ever again, as she didn't want to risk our relationship, and for the sake of her happiness, he had kept his distance. However, they had reconnected at a high school reunion nearly 6 months before she finally told me the truth, and they had reignited their relationship once more because he was doing well and he was still in love with her, and she had realized that she was still in love with him as well, so she needed to leave. It was a dreadful time for me because I had been with this woman for such a long period. I had built a life with her, and yet I was being betrayed as if it meant nothing to her. Anyway, after she told me the truth, she moved out of the house with all her possessions. But Johnny continued to stay with me because he didn't want to go with her. She hadn't even discussed it with me before disclosing the truth to him, and he already knew everything before I had even gotten home from work. So both of us ended up comforting each other as we cried, since our lives had been completely turned upside down. I knew that regardless of the divorce proceedings, I would ensure we had shared custody of Johnny, because regardless of his biological parentage, he was my son through and through. I had raised him, and no one could ever take that from me, neither Nathan nor even Megan. I spoke to my lawyer and filed for a divorce within hours of finding out the truth, and the terms of my divorce petition were quite simple and fair. I would retain everything we owned, and she shouldn't anticipate any alimony, because she had been a stay-at-home mother for the past 14 years since she left her job after Johnny was born. And despite all my backing, she had been unfaithful to me. She had already been exploiting me for financial benefit throughout all the years we had been together. I wasn't going to allow that any longer. Of course, she disagreed with that and contested the divorce terms, seeking alimony and a considerable settlement amount. I was ready to fight for it. I didn't mind. But she made things worse by filing for full custody 3 weeks ago, apparently because she and Nathan were planning to relocate to another city to establish a branch of his business there, and they wished to take Johnny with them. I would be granted visitation rights, but she demanded full custody now that things had finally gone well, so she could play happy family with Nathan, merely because it was convenient for her. There was no way I was going to permit that to happen, and since we couldn't settle this through mediation, the issue ended up in family court. I was quite sure that this would be easy for me, but she and Nathan started lying profusely about what kind of person I was, and I had to strive really hard to prove them mistaken, which is what has been complicating everything. Even though Johnny himself said he wanted to remain here with me since he has grown up here, they are doing everything they can to make it seem that Johnny is mistaken, and that I'm the one influencing him. And they believe that I'm too much of a workaholic to look after him by myself, and he would be better off living with his mother. There's also the fact that I'm not his biological parent, which is why everything is taking twice as long to settle. Ever since the divorce proceedings began and Megan moved out, we had reached an informal arrangement on how we would divide our time with Johnny. Until then, we had an understanding where he would spend the first 4 days of the week with Nathan and Megan, and would come back to me for the weekend. I believed that this was the agreement that we would stick to even after the divorce, but they made everything far more complex than needed by choosing to move to another city and suddenly filing for full custody. So we have been involved in a custody disagreement for the past couple of weeks. But when we were in family court recently, Johnny stated something that caused everyone to go into a frenzy. This was the first time he had been directly involved in the court proceedings, and at one point he said he wanted to stay here with me and still intended to stick to that. But not just because his life was established here, but also because he had overheard Megan and Nathan talking on the phone with their lawyer the night before, and he had overheard them talking about how they would depict me as the villain, and had devised a set of falsehoods that he started recounting, which were much worse than those they had presented earlier. Prior to this, they had only been asserting that I was too much of a workaholic and didn't have enough time for Johnny, that I would take work home with me, and that most of my time at home I would just stay shut in my room and would always be occupied with work conferences, even on weekends. They had also claimed that I seldom cared about Johnny's school performance and hadn't attended a single parent-teacher conference since his birth, leaving it all to my wife because I found it dull and never showed interest in his life. These assertions were easy to disprove, but apparently Johnny had heard they planned to escalate their allegations and genuinely make it seem as though I was abusing him by claiming that I would physically attack him and shout at him for the smallest mistakes. But apparently Johnny was too afraid to discuss that in court in front of me, and then they might be able to obtain protective custody of him for the time being and ultimately turn him against me, which would make their task simpler. So he wanted to get ahead of them and clarify for himself that he had never been ill-treated by me, and if anything, it was Megan and Nathan who were ill-treating him by dragging him into this messy custody dispute and using him as a pawn to retaliate against me for my divorce petition, which would leave Megan with absolutely nothing, even though my filing was fair since she had never earned any money independently and had even dared to deceive me despite being highly reliant on me. She believed that she deserved the alimony and the settlement she was requesting and intended to use Johnny's custody as leverage against me so we could reach a divorce settlement. And on the phone, he had overheard her stating that once they received the money from the divorce, She would invest in Nathan's business and take it to new heights, and they had been practically celebrating with joy while discussing this. So the volume was likely the last thing on their minds. Unfortunately, they had neglected to consider that at that time, Johnny was staying with them and hadn't come back to me yet, so they had been rather noisy, and he had been standing right outside the door and had heard it all. After Johnny revealed Megan and Nathan, nobody knew what to do. So the meeting had to be adjourned because our lawyers grew a bit too loud, and we ended up having to leave early. I felt quite satisfied because after Johnny had spoken, I turned to look at Megan, and she literally had her head in her hands, gripping her hair with such might that I thought she would rip it out, which just confirmed all of this was true and she was ruined. I was pleased with how the situation had unfolded, and instead of returning home with Megan, Johnny opted to walk up to me, and we started to go home together. But Megan was enraged, so she stopped us just as we were about to get into our car, grabbed Johnny by the arm, and began shaking him while demanding an explanation for why he would do such a thing in court and ruin his chances of living with her and Nathan. When I saw her shaking him, I lost my temper. So I approached her, stepped between them, and shoved her back so she wouldn't be able to lay a finger on him. Fortunately, my lawyer recorded all of that on camera, and we will definitely be using that in our next session. But anyway, I told her to back off and said it was her own fault for being a disgusting human being. And I was glad that Johnny had taken a stand for me, because he was not a spineless, spoiled, greedy monster like her. I was already rather annoyed by how she was treating Johnny, particularly after what I had discovered in court. I was unwilling to let this persist, but then Nathan came to her defense and started yelling at us, both about how she had done so much for our family, and now we couldn't even let her have a real chance at happiness with him. I had no interest in talking to that guy, so I just rolled my eyes and started getting back into the car again. But then Megan kept clinging to Johnny's arm and stated she wouldn't allow him to come back home with me because I was the one manipulating him against his own mother, and she wasn't going to permit this to happen. She told me that until now she had only been seeking full custody so she could take Johnny with her and Nathan when they moved, but now she was going to make sure I wouldn't even get visitation rights. These were bold words from someone who had just been exposed as a liar, and who had been planning to deceive in court so she could obtain money she didn't deserve. Anyway, I told her to let go of Johnny, or I would call the police, and she said that she was his mother, and she had the right to decide where he would go. Even Johnny kept trying to free himself, but she was holding on to him very tightly, and persisted in claiming she wouldn't allow him to return home with me. At one point, things got a bit heated, and Johnny is quite sturdy and well-built, even though he's only 14. Megan, on the other hand, is small and not very strong, so Johnny did the only thing he could. He shoved her quite hard to free himself, get into the car, and close the door. But after she had been pushed, she started screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was inciting her son to attack her, and she wasn't going to let this go. I thought that was an unjust thing to say because he had not attacked her. He had simply tried to free himself. In doing so, she might have been jostled a little. She would have fallen, but Nathan was right there to catch her. So no harm done, right? Well, evidently not, because she and Nathan kept standing in front of our car and declared that she would ensure I lost custody of him. Because if I was inciting him to be violent towards others, simply because things weren't going my way, then I was certainly not fit to be a parent. It wasn't until I honked for so long that the horn gave out that they eventually moved out of the way and permitted us to get back home. It has been a few days since then, and I'm still questioning if it was the right thing for me not to scold Johnny for pushing his mother. He seems completely unaware, but I'm in a predicament right now, because that day he had certainly shoved Megan very hard, and he's very strong, so I don't want him replicating this sort of behavior with anyone else. But given those circumstances, I feel like he was justified in doing what he did. Anyway, I'm just unsure if Megan was right or not, because Johnny has somewhat had issues with violence previously, So, am I wrong for not scolding my son for pushing his mother away from him? Update 1. Hey, so a few of you asked me why I mentioned that Johnny has had violence issues previously, and that's because a few months back he was experiencing bullying at school and he hadn't informed us. But one day we simply got a call from the principal's office stating that Johnny had been in a fight and he had been hurt, but the boy he had punched in the face was even more severely injured. Evidently, that boy had been harassing Johnny for multiple weeks, and he had overlooked it at first. But then the boy began going too far and started swearing at our family, and Johnny didn't appreciate that. He told the other boy to stop it a few times, but when he still didn't, and even attempted to deface his locker with swear words, he simply snapped and hit the boy. So there was an entire fight in the hallway. Naturally, I told Johnny that violence was never the answer to anything because I didn't want him participating in fights and getting into trouble, but I was rather proud of him for defending himself. I guess Johnny has never truly been violent unless the situation calls for it, and I think that's a positive trait. Even in this scenario with his mother, he was simply trying to free himself. He wasn't truly trying to harm anyone. Therefore, Megan misinterpreted the situation and is trying to use that against us. But I'm not going to doubt myself. A week has gone by since the incident, and tomorrow we are set to meet again. First, we're going to meet with our attorneys so we can come to a divorce settlement, and then we are meeting in court regarding Johnny's custody. After the disclosure during our session, I seriously doubt they have any chance, so tomorrow could be the day we can finally conclude this chapter and reach a decision about what to do. Nevertheless, my attorney and I have collected all the evidence I could gather, showing that I'm actually a good father, and we're expecting to win this case. And more importantly, Johnny's words will count the most, and he has stated quite clearly that he does not want to live with his mother. And it's not merely because he wants to live here and doesn't want to move, but because she is simply a truly terrible person, and so is Nathan, and they will never be able to raise him properly. And we certainly don't need another individual like them. I was talking with Johnny a few hours ago, and he mentioned that he was rather anxious because this will be the first time he sees his mother after pushing her away from him, and he understood that she was very upset about it. He admitted to me that he was trying very hard not to care about what she thinks, but after all, she is his biological mother, and we have spent so many years together as a family that it's hard to come to terms with the truth. Now, he told me that he was really afraid of what would happen if by chance he ended up being given to Megan and Nathan, but I reassured him that it wouldn't happen. I would go to any court in the world to make sure that it didn't happen so he could be with me since he was my son. Nobody cares about some silly paternity test. If I say he's my son, then he's my son. That seemed to make him feel a bit better, but I can tell that the entire situation has been affecting him. I don't even know how I'm going to handle the situation if in the end I do end up with custody of him. How do we recover from that? Because eventually his mother is going to leave the city and move with Nathan. I'm pretty sure that after everything that has happened, she won't want to see Johnny again if she doesn't get custody of him. She's just that kind of person, and I don't want him to lose his relationship with his mother because I don't want him to resent me in the future. Anyway, we are leaving. And perhaps tomorrow may not be the final day of this case, but for my sake and Johnny's sake, we are hoping that it really is. Update 2. Hello. So something pretty strange just happened. It's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning now, and I was sleeping. But then almost an hour ago, someone rang the doorbell, and when I went to answer it, I saw there was no one outside. Just a brown envelope left at the door. I even reviewed the security footage, but whoever placed it outside was dressed entirely in black and had a hood pulled over their head, so I couldn't identify them. However, that individual was taller than 5 feet 3 inches, so it couldn't have been Megan, and they were either somewhat on the heavier side or the hoodie they were wearing was very bulky. Regardless, I don't believe it was Nathan either, and these two individuals are the only potential options since what was inside the brown envelope is what surprised me. Inside, There were results of a paternity test, and surprisingly, they were positive. The results originated from the same lab where we underwent testing a couple of months prior, when Megan told me that Johnny was not biologically my son, and she had presented me with the results that indicated Johnny and I were not a match. I had the test done 3 times, just to confirm she was telling the truth, and all 3 times the results had been the same, and that's when I was finally convinced of the truth. But the results I just received indicate that Johnny and I are actually a match, so I'm very confused right now. I don't know which results are false and which are true. Honestly, I found it very difficult to believe Johnny wasn't my son, as we look so similar, and I had never felt like he wasn't my son. So whoever sent me these test results is trying to mess with my head a day before we meet to decide on custody, or perhaps there's something I've been missing all along. Perhaps Megan and Nathan pulled off paternity fraud or something. I called the laboratory just now, but clearly they didn't respond because, well, they're likely not even open yet. However, the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is visit the place, because this is really confusing, and I have no idea what to do right now. I have, however, spoken with my lawyer about this, and we're going to figure something out tomorrow. First, we just need to confirm these results are real. So I'm going to get tested again, but this time I'm not going to tell Megan anything about it. I don't know why, but I simply have a strong feeling that I'm definitely going to get some answers tomorrow if I confront her with these results. Update 3. Hello everyone. So today was an extremely long day. First, I went to the laboratory with Johnny and my lawyer to inquire about the results I'd received just last night. But before I could ask anyone about it, the man who seemed to be in charge took us aside and told us it was him. He had given me the envelope last night, but he hadn't actually expected me to show up. He explained to us that when we first underwent testing, Megan and Nathan had already spoken with him after they'd done some research and discovered which laboratory the court used, and they had an arrangement that he would alter the results and present them as negative, so she could assert Johnny wasn't my son and attempt to take him with her. Apparently, she had simply presumed that once I discovered Johnny wasn't my biological son, I would abandon my efforts to be his father and leave them be. However, when that didn't occur after I received the initial test results, and I returned for 2 additional tests, she decided to instruct this man to assist her and falsify the results twice more. All this was done behind our backs, and she had promised him she would eventually make him a partner in the business once she received the money from our settlement, and he was anticipating that, which is why he had assisted her 2 more times and had the paternity test results falsified all 3 times. I was astonished when I learned this because I had truly never imagined she was capable of such a thing. Anyway, he had had a change of heart recently because he had stayed in contact with Megan all along, and he had learned what happened at family court, our previous meeting, since she needed to inform him that things were taking longer than she had anticipated, and they wouldn't be able to start their business for a few more months. Thus, he would have to wait. He had concluded he could not continue with her at that point, as she was clearly very immoral and unethical, and so he decided to slip me that document last night. He apologized for all the trouble he had caused, and practically pleaded with me not to involve him in any of this, as he truly wished to remain anonymous. And I was rather upset, because this man, who didn't even know me, had wronged me a few months prior just for money, and I truly wanted to report him. But that would simply mean additional effort for me, and I lacked the energy to do that. Perhaps if he repeats this kind of behavior, someone else will, but until that time, I'm out. Moreover, I already possessed the documents I needed to prove my paternity, so it didn't matter to me what happened to him. If it came down to it, and I had to establish something in court, I would certainly use that as evidence and report him. However, for the time being, I had a different plan in mind. So then I proceeded to court. But before we could be seated for our scheduled meeting to reach a divorce settlement, I took Megan aside, and she was quite surprised by that action. I told her that I had received this document last night, and they were the true results of the paternity test, so she immediately understood that I knew about the fraud she had committed. She initially tried to act innocent, but I told her that paternity fraud is a serious matter, and I was going to give her one opportunity to avoid further trouble if she agreed to my petition's terms this time and also signed away her parental rights over Johnny. She agreed to the first part, but she wasn't agreeable to the second part and tried to negotiate with me, saying that she was his mother and couldn't just let him go. However, I wasn't buying any of that, and I told her that no mother in the world would do something like this to her own son, so now she could do what I asked of her, or I would create a lot of trouble for her. After arguing with me for nearly 10 minutes, she finally agreed, and I felt like I had won. After that, I finally managed to reach a settlement, and my lawyer and I were thrilled because she had agreed to the petition's terms. And after that, we only had to wait for our final confrontation in family court, and there too things unfolded exactly as planned. And she was displeased about it, but she consented to terminate her parental rights over Johnny and depart. That surprised everyone since she had been fighting fiercely for his custody for the past couple of weeks, and now suddenly she had capitulated. So that seemed somewhat odd, but I didn't mind. But the results I just received indicate that Johnny and I are actually a match, so I'm very confused right now. I don't know which results are false and which are true. Honestly, I found it very difficult to believe Johnny wasn't my son, as we look so similar, and I had never felt like he wasn't my son. So whoever sent me these test results is trying to mess with my head a day before we meet to decide on custody. Or perhaps there's something I've been missing all along. Perhaps Megan and Nathan pulled off paternity fraud or something? I called the laboratory just now, but clearly they didn't respond because, well, they're likely not even open yet. However, the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is visit the place, because this is really confusing and I have no idea what to do right now. I have, however, spoken with my lawyer about this, and we're going to figure something out tomorrow. First, we just need to confirm these results are real. So I'm going to get tested again, but this time I'm not going to tell Megan anything about it. I don't know why, but I simply have a strong feeling that I'm definitely going to get some answers tomorrow if I confront her with these results. Update 3. Hello everyone. So today was an extremely long day. First, I went to the laboratory with Johnny and my lawyer to inquire about the results I'd received just last night. But before I could ask anyone about it, the man who seemed to be in charge took us aside and told us it was him. He had given me the envelope last night, but he hadn't actually expected me to show up. He explained to us that when we first underwent testing, Megan and Nathan had already spoken with him after they'd done some research and discovered which laboratory the court used, and they had an arrangement that he would alter the results and present them as negative, so she could assert Johnny wasn't my son and attempt to take him with her. Apparently, she had simply presumed that once I discovered Johnny wasn't my biological son, I would abandon my efforts to be his father and leave them be. However, when that didn't occur after I received the initial test results, and I returned for 2 additional tests, she decided to instruct this man to assist her and falsify the results twice more. All this was done behind our backs, and she had promised him she would eventually make him a partner in the business once she received the money from our settlement, and he was anticipating that, which is why he had assisted her 2 more times and had the paternity test results falsified all 3 times. I was astonished when I learned this because I had truly never imagined she was capable of such a thing. Anyway, he had had a change of heart recently because he had stayed in contact with Megan all along, and he had learned what happened at family court, our previous meeting, since she needed to inform him that things were taking longer than she had anticipated, and they wouldn't be able to start their business for a few more months. Thus, he would have to wait. He had concluded he could not continue with her at that point, as she was clearly very immoral and unethical, and so he decided to slip me that document last night. He apologized for all the trouble he had caused, and practically pleaded with me not to involve him in any of this, as he truly wished to remain anonymous. And I was rather upset, because this man, who didn't even know me, had wronged me a few months prior just for money, and I truly wanted to report him. But that would simply mean additional effort for me, and I lacked the energy to do that. Perhaps if he repeats this kind of behavior, someone else will, but until that time, I'm out. Moreover, I already possessed the documents I needed to prove my paternity, so it didn't matter to me what happened to him. If it came down to it, and I had to establish something in court, I would certainly use that as evidence and report him. However, for the time being, I had a different plan in mind. So then I proceeded to court. But before we could be seated for our scheduled meeting to reach a divorce settlement, I took Megan aside, and she was quite surprised by that action. I told her that I had received this document last night, and they were the true results of the paternity test. So she immediately understood that I knew about the fraud she had committed. She initially tried to act innocent, but I told her that paternity fraud is a serious matter, and I was going to give her one opportunity to avoid further trouble if she agreed to my petition's terms this time and also signed away her parental rights over Johnny. She agreed to the first part, but she wasn't agreeable to the second part and tried to negotiate with me, saying that she was his mother and couldn't just let him go. However, I wasn't buying any of that, and I told her that no mother in the world would do something like this to her own son, so now she could do what I asked of her, or I would create a lot of trouble for her. After arguing with me for nearly 10 minutes, she finally agreed, and I felt like I had won. After that, I finally managed to reach a settlement, and my lawyer and I were thrilled because she had agreed to the petition's terms. And after that, we only had to wait for our final confrontation in family court, and there too things unfolded exactly as planned. And she was displeased about it, but she consented to terminate her parental rights over Johnny and depart. That surprised everyone since she had been fighting fiercely for his custody for the past couple of weeks, and now suddenly she had capitulated. So that seemed somewhat odd, but I didn't mind. I had won Johnny. My lawyer and I finally went our separate ways and headed to our respective homes a couple of hours ago. And in a couple of days, my lawyer will have drafted the papers, and she will finally have signed away her rights. And then it's just going to be me and my son against the world. Even though I think it's sort of been like that for the past couple of months already, but I just can't wait for all of this to be officially over, and then I can finally try and move on with my life, because this has all been quite intense. However, as of now, Johnny is extremely happy with the situation, and so am I, so we're just trying to make the most of it.